Battleships unloaded their ammunition with no regard for spending, like there is no tomorrow, which was reasonable as there might not be. They overpowered aquatic beasts under the influence of darkness, ate those bullets like breakfast. Some got them positioned to hijack some ships, and the transcendent soldiers moved to defend. The sea has devolved into a bloody battlefield of projectiles and savage clashes. Unfortunately for the humans, there was a seemingly endless supply of sea beasts emerging batch after batch. Going by sheer numbers of experts versus beasts, the humans were at a massive disadvantage. The ship full of knights was struggling in such a disadvantageous position. Ship captains were slowly losing hope as they could see the emergence of colossal sea beasts on the right side of the field. All they could do was spray and pray that the ammo they were using was powerful enough for a deterrent. But all the spraying and praying were useless against tough scales, and a killer pink beam blasting through the engine room. The ship's left side was toast. Water was flooding into the hull, slowly sinking the ship. To make matters worse, they ran out of ammunition. One saving grace was switching to a backup power source, which was still feasible to use for the propulsion system. The captain was a brave man. Even if they have to die on the sea, he won't let a single beast off easily. Without bullets, he would gladly use the ship itself as a blunt weapon to ram into a row of beasts. It was a suicide mission, but it seemed to work at least. The explosion deleted quite a few enemies. Yule, the master of magnetism, watched from afar as the Hua Xia side showed their bravery. In front of him were monsters of all shapes and sizes, including the dark urchins. The non-stop appearance of new monsters was not just troublesome anymore. It might be their downfall. He knew that the ammunition they had been using to keep most beasts from advancing would run dry. What would follow would most likely be complete defeat. Some unlucky chaps were assigned to the spot where hungry shark beasts emerged, and you already know how that would go. Spatial magic prodigy Lin Ziyi and the priestess worked hand in hand, trying to minimize damage. But they also knew that the rate they were going to would not be sustainable if it continued. Lin Ziyi was so worried about the wave in front of her that she did not notice a maw coming from the side. She would have been a quick snack if it wasn't for the arrival of the new players in town. The prodigy was mortified. Had she not been saved on time, she would have surely perished without even knowing how. Her savior was none other than the five-headed giant snake who had turned gigantic after its training arc under the ocean. If the snake was in here, of course, the orca would follow. They had successfully rallied a few independent sea tribes to provide some much-needed backup. Yuma freaked out at the sight of these new grotesque faces behind the fleet. But the orca spoke out in human tongue, insisting that he deal with the sea beasts in front and not to worry about the rear. Those that had keener senses, like the bishop, felt the spiritual breath of the mutant tree on the surprised guests. Then came a strike strong enough to make a deep-sea king falter and shatter the shell. A decisive voice urged the humans to not give up as the final moments were yet to come. Golden Jesus looked to his side and was surprised to see an unexpected face. It was Seth of the Western Wasteland, the previous rank 4 among the mainland's 10 great beasts, venerated as a god. This time, Seth's not the only one who came to assist the god tree. There are also the glacier beasts of the north walking on water. One swipe with a vicious roar froze the ocean over, making spiky walls of ice around the ships. These ice structures should be beneficial as footholds for humans. This is just the Marine-Ford War in one piece at this point. But here, they have transcendent Johnny Sins, who's a little confused as to what's happening, but would gladly ride or die with his benefactor's cause. A fiery meteor struck down a fanged beast. Not only was it scorching hot, but the velocity alone made it a lethal attack. The only one who could manipulate fire to this level is the woman they call the Flame Empress, Shi Yaoqing. Behind her was an aggregation of genetic freaks enhanced by beastly traits who were hungry for slaughter, feared by many. The Dark Assembly had entered the fray. With their bare bodies that rivaled a beast's, the genetic hybrids engaged. On the mainland, the backup was also starting to arrive. Gong looked up to the skies and saw a freaking phoenix blocking out the light with its massive body. The power of this legendary beast has over flames cannot be understated. It basically fried a whole fleet of Australian monsters without a fuss. Any sort of help would be much appreciated, so this was great news. Darkness has been paying attention to the minor skirmishes outside of the main duel, and his belief that the creatures on this planet are fools has been strengthened. Even though they can't change anything with the disparity in power, they just never give up. But that's where his logic was flawed. God Tree knew from experience that a cornered creature would fight and claw its way to survival. They have yet to acknowledge this war as a lost cause. Darkness does not like getting his ideals questioned, so he just wants to kill God Tree and slaughter the rest of the army to prove that he's right. But that might have just become a little more difficult now that another surprise guest has arrived. God Tree got the vibe that these new arrivals are not hostile against him. This was only natural, as it was the entirety of the celestial tribe that had just touched down to do their job. Evolved Australites wreak havoc using their nasty beams of concentrated energy, while Little Panda expertly maneuvers around the destructive attack. You should be fine when dealing with one, but evolved Australites have swarmed the mainland at all angles. Just as he was about to fall victim to one, something happened. His big brother finally reached the front lines and saved his little bro, dislocating an Australit's jaw. He yelled at the little one to take this battle more seriously if he wanted to survive. With the monster's fall, hundreds of smaller Australian beasts were crushed to death. Little Panda was not expecting to see his big bad brother in here. Big Panda's sights and nose were directed to the breaths of the mutant tree and darkness up ahead. So, he decided to kill his way into the Earth Dome. Back inside the main ring, the light of the celestial tribe's entry shone brightly. Darkness took one look at them and felt that they were awfully familiar. He reckons that they must be the future generation of those bastards that sealed him. He could finally settle his own's worth of grievances once and for all. Already acquainted with the God Tree, White Elephant expressed their intention to help. The celestial dragon narrowed his eyes. He didn't expect Darkness to use the spirit tide to break free. He would have stayed sealed if the celestial tribe had not declined in strength throughout every passing generation. They angrily retorted that Darkness should have just remained in the deep sea. He just laughed at their pitiful remarks, for they are the ones who should return where they came from. So, he'll add these bunch to the corpses he'll bury after the war. Spending 50,000 evolution points, Darkness busted out of the terrifying grasp of the dragon catcher. He tried to swipe the field, smashing through the enemies, but was blocked by God Tree's posture. Left open after a blocked attack, the celestial beings took their shot. White Elephant took to the air for a sky-piercing hoof. The celestial aquatic dragon created a shimmering pool of water torrent, while the last of the three conjured a barrage of whirling cannons. Darkness responded by spending 50,000 points to create a light shield. That coordinated celestial attack could not even pierce through. He laughed and taunted them to stop scratching and start attacking properly instead. That taunt might have backfired, as God Tree was about to drop the Call of Light. Possessing a superior affinity with the light element, he dropped a Pillar of Brilliance. This one made Darkness buckle as he hurriedly purchased the reverse skill. That's when the big panda seized the perfect opportunity to disrupt the battle. His claws manifested a green apparition, made of energy to clobber Darkness. If there's one he can't forgive, it would be the genocidal Darkness. But the incarnation of evil just scoffed at that sentiment. For a minute, God Tree was alarmed as he sensed a breath similar to that of Little Panda entering this death zone. But Big Panda is more than capable of defending himself, and he came here to kill Darkness no matter what it takes. After suffering from multiple ranged attacks, the incarnation of evil was very susceptible against melee combat. The celestial beasts immediately provided cover fire from a distance to make Darkness suffer even more. Then, another familiar figure entered the fray seamlessly, the Flame Empress. Her blazing blade cut through the flesh of darkness like a hot knife slicing through butter. Godtree tried to yell at Shi Yaoqing to watch out as the monster had gotten infuriated with all the unwelcome interruptions. Flame Empress would have been caught by the tentacles of darkness if the celestial dragon had not acted fast enough. With half his body immobile, Darkness was forced to eat another sky-piercing hoof to the face. The initial contact shattered his face, and the full impact was just pure destruction. With Darkness being a stationary target, the aquatic dragon shot another water dragon. This sequence of ruthless attacks virtually deleted the seemingly invincible body, riddling it with holes. Big Panda focused all of his strength on one fist attack, with the intent to send the final boss to hell. It was a powerful punch that would not pale in comparison compared to the Celestials, but he also had the tenacity and aggression to keep going further. It was going so hard that he failed to see that the enemy's body had entirely disintegrated. Darkness shed his fake body to reveal a devilish beast that came straight out of a nightmare. With the form change came a different arsenal of attacks. Darkness unleashed beams of power, homing in on the pesky pests. As always, Godtree had to bail his allies out of danger as he put up another earth elemental wall. The beams quickly shattered the walls, causing sudden explosions. The dust settled, and Darkness saw the celestial beings pooling their power together to return him to the place where he belonged.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
With the three swirling together, a spirit ball of compressed power threatened Darkness. His many eyes turned bloodshot with anger. These bastards were trying to seal him again. White Elephant did not deny their mission. Everything has been set for this moment. Sealing Darkness is the sole reason for the Celestial Tribe's existence, after all. The spirit ball reached the disemboweled body of Darkness, trapping it inside. The sphere then started getting sucked by a sealing portal. With the extraordinary suction of the sealing technique, Darkness would be hard-pressed to get out of this one. While the portal caves in to pull him inside, he curses at the bastards trying to imprison him again. How can he let these lowly creatures succeed again? Fueled by anger and rebellion, he used the claws of Darkness to shred through the sphere, freeing himself. He did that by extending the claws, stabbing the white elephant before everybody's eyes. The surprised beast coughed up blood as his life flashed before his eyes. The following targets were the dragon duo, and they did not stand a chance at all. If Big Panda and the Flame Empress had not intervened, they would have suffered the same fate as White Elephant. The Empress knew that they could not afford to let Darkness interrupt their best shot of sealing the evil incarnate. Injuring the elephant was enough to shatter the sphere a little. So, the celestial elephant blamed himself for almost ruining the seal. At this rate, Darkness could escape given time. Just when they needed it, attacks made of dirt hit Darkness in various spots to push him further inside the portal. With Earth element manipulation, Godtree intended to make the final boss scram back to where it belongs. Darkness kept on struggling, but it looked a lot like a losing battle at this point. The coalition of some of the most powerful creatures on the planet had somehow set aside their differences to make this happen. After an extended period of struggle, the presence of Darkness slowly dissolves into infinite nothingness. The next thing you know, the hole in space had already closed tightly. The coalition did not lower their guards immediately, but the feeling of victory was starting to become apparent. In the spot where the most significant global threat made its last stand, only a massive hole was left. There was no one happier than the descendants of the Celestial Tribe. After so many years, they succeeded once again, even if they had to pay a heavy price. Big Panda could no longer feel the breath of darkness permeating the air. Maybe they really did it. Godtree was already thinking of how to deal with the remaining beasts outside the dome. White Elephant must have pushed himself too hard after sustaining a lethal injury and finally collapsed. His comrades immediately checked on him, and it did not look good. Shi Yaoqing's been affiliated with the big guys since the war years ago, so she felt compelled to offer some essence of life for recovery. She had already told him to bring some just to be safe, but the elephant had been too stubborn in the past. But this time, he needs to lower his pride and stubbornness to accept the essence. Lowering their guards swiftly cost the aquatic dragon his head, decapitated by his sharp and dark energy. Shi Gaoqing looked at the blood spill. This could only mean one thing, right? One of the pillars of the sealing technique has been beheaded, and another was mortally injured on the ground. White Elephant's blood boiled, realizing that they had been deceived. Big Panda reacted quickly, readying himself for round 2, but he was not fast enough. The dark energy also got him shredding through the fur and skin. It set the Big Panda into a rock formation, planting him deep within. God Tree extended his tendrils as the highest concentration of dark energy closed in from multiple angles. Looking at the skies, an omen of the apocalypse showed itself as space itself shattered, revealing a red hue. When the fragments of dimension finally gave in, a gigantic eye full of hatred revealed itself. He had been sealed in the same space for multiple lifetimes. That obsolete sealing method could not possibly get him dirty again, but he made sure of that. Angered by the assassination of their third, the remaining celestial beasts charged forward with a vengeance. The eye in the sky turned to them and summoned more tendrils through dark impact. These tendrils were fast and sturdy, nothing like the attacks that the celestial beings had ever encountered before. Big Panda, who was buried on the rocks, emerged with his giant apparition. That initial attack did a number on him. The bastard dared to deliberately gouge his eyes out, blinding him. Darkness had stopped talking trash after his re-emergence. Spanning 300,000 evolution points, he purchased imitation, taking on the Big Panda's form and augmenting his frame with physical enhancement. With a superior body, one punch was all it took to dissipate the apparition. The punch was so heavy that the rebounded injury to Big Panda was severe. Throwing 150,000 evolution points into his system, Darkness purchased the Devourer skill. Taking on another fluid form, he picked up the nearly dying enemies from the floor to consume. The others couldn't react fast enough. Those that fell first got eaten mercilessly, seemingly hungry for more. Darkness moved fast and sharply, heading for the Flame Empress. God Tree managed to get to her side on time, punching the hungry Darkness out of the way. He told her to retreat to the other side. He might be the only one capable of standing toe to toe against the enemy now. It's the battle of systems, for real. Shi Yaoqing tried to protest, but she knew that this fight was now out of her pay grade. Still, God Tree had to order her to retreat for her own sake. She had never seen the always composed master this troubled by an opponent. Darkness Panda caught this interaction and became curious as to why the mutant tree was so protective of the girl. Irritated, God Tree closed the distance between them in a split second, shutting the enemy up. Surprisingly, his hard roots did not match his sharp claws. One swipe was enough to disintegrate one of God Tree's limbs. But that should not be a problem, as you could always spawn more. With more arms aiming to get him, Darkness lashed out with an octuple strike. It was super effective. Every root was cut precisely before they made contact. God Tree gnashed his teeth. This is not looking good at all. Compared to just a moment ago, Darkness feels like a whole new entity. This might be his real strength, and it's terrifying. Then came the invocation of gravity, catching God Tree off guard. He suddenly felt his body grow multiple times heavier, making it hard to move. He tried to resist as hard as he could, but Darkness was already coming in with a combo using Dragon King's breath. The only thing he could do to stop the attack was to cancel it with a fast-cast Pillar of Light. It was effective in stopping the breath, but Darkness just scoffed at its damage. It's a good thing God Tree's fast on his feet, thinking that light cannot be bound by gravity. Darkness finally opened his mouth again, praising Yuziyu for possessing human knowledge. So, in hopes of finally finishing the job, Darkness spent 2 million evolution points to call upon extinction. The sky opened up, and a gigantic meteor appeared through the skies. That meteor had the perfect size to shatter the entire battlefield. It's up to God Tree to make a choice, between escape or dying together with everyone else. God Tree does not like being looked down upon, so he used gigantification. Darkness thinks that this is futile resistance, but he wants to watch. Even with gigantification, the meteor was still superior in size. God Tree had to utilize the full power of 9 wood arboreal roots if he wanted to stay in one piece. The roots seemed sturdy enough to hold the hurling meteor and its unstoppable momentum. Buckling now would be tantamount to the destruction of the planet. It's in the name of the skill of extinction. This struggle went on for a while, and everyone's fate literally rested on God Tree's shoulders. He could not really throw the meteor back into the stratosphere, so he had to be creative. Piercing a massive rock with its roots, it was divided into 1,000 shards containing the power of destruction. Some unfortunate beasts nearby were caught by the blast. Even the stronger beasts like Kangaroo and Nine Tails were not exempt from the rain of death. Qinggang took on the role of protector, down in the vanguard with his earth defense. Little Panda was out in the open, trying to survive the meteor rain with his speed. He saw just how powerful each shard of extinction was in real time. The strong spirit power contained within each rock was palpable. Everyone was finally feeling the level of the battle between darkness and God Tree. Extinction successfully destroyed the earth barrier, and the concealed spirit power inside was flowing out horrifyingly. Thunder Dragon watched as his fight was disturbed by the meteor rain. His dad, his greatest enemy, was slain by a stray piece of the meteor. This was possible thanks to Zi Leon's effort to cut the dragon's wings and legs, limiting mobility. With his last breath, the Australian dragon looked up and remarked that Thunder Dragon's spirit power felt exactly like his mother's. Before closing his eyes, the deadbeat father praised his son for growing up well.
We do not care.
Even though he came here to fight, the last moments of his parent broke the young dragon's heart. Back in the main fight, a massive crater has been dug by the extinction spell. Shi Yaoqing runs up, trying to find her master. Thankfully, there seem to be some signs of life hidden in the billowing dust. God Tree's body has been decimated to a pathetic degree. Half of his form was vaporized by the blast, not giving him any room to breathe and recover. Darkness charged in with solar flare, crimson lotus combined with a physique of flames. Purple flames surrounded his body, ramming into the already struggling God Tree. But he's not going down without a fight. Using his remaining hand, he converged thunder. With some precisely calculated timing, he managed to stab darkness in the eye with it. His mastery over this electrifying element was no joke. Give him some space, and he could blast a hole into anything. One attack was all it took for the tables to turn back in his favor once again. Darkness recovered and repositioned fast, unleashing a beastly roar. Even with a torn physical form, he's still determined to drive this world towards extinction, and he won't let anyone stop that. Darkness reckoned that this world would eventually head towards extinction. It was inevitable. He would kill every human. That was all he ever wanted. When asked if his hatred for humans stemmed from being sealed away, Darkness got weirdly quiet. He thought there was no point in confessing his reasons. He returned the question to Yu Ziyu and asked if he really trusted those filthy humans completely. The disintegrated body of the God Tree did not answer. For the incarnation of evil, humans were an unforgivable lot. He deeply loathed their selfishness, arrogance, weakness, ignorance, foolish decisions, and everything they stood for. The sole reason for his existence was to kill them all and absorb their energy for himself. Everybody felt the dark energy permeate the atmosphere. Seth, Yule, the Arctic beasts, the bishop, transcendent Johnny Sins, the gold masks, and many more looked up to the skies. The moon was getting gradually bigger before their eyes, but it was not increasing in size. It was crashing down towards the planet instead. Do you guys remember what's on the moon? This was inconceivable. Humanity could never prepare a contingency plan for something that insane. Darkness was planning to destroy the planet, and even the most powerful political figures in the world couldn't do anything to stop it. God Tree growled at Darkness for being a petty bastard with a sob story. He did not deny those insults. He embraced them. According to his calculation, the moon would crash in 30 minutes. He was challenging Yuziyu to defeat him within half an hour. In a pinch, God Tree wasn't sure if he could pull this off. Suddenly, a beam of thunder exploded out towards darkness. Thunder Dragon, fresh from mourning his deadbeat father, had come to join his master. He was young and dumb, and should not be poking his nose in a fight against someone like Darkness. The thunder beam was met with the wind element manipulation technique as wind blades cut through the distance. The seemingly unstoppable thunder energy was cut and dissipated, the wind blades continuing to slice the dragon in half. Then came the jaws, aiming to chomp down on the sliced lizard. It would have been a quick and tasty snack if it was not for the Flame Empress. Xiao Qing used her beast souls, which were bound by her earrings, to drive Darkness away from the Thunder Dragon. Infuriated, Darkness retaliated by melding a nasty ball of devastation. Once again, the careless Misty Mountain troops were bailed out by the big boss. Taking on a form made of lava and magma, God Tree went to a brawl. He actually shattered his heart to obtain more spirit power by force. Darkness laughed, admiring his enemy's stubborn persistence. A life and death battle was the best kind of battle, after all. Yuziyu grabbed his subordinates out of the way and tossed them inside the dimension of life to recover. Xiao Qing did not want to, but she had no choice in the matter. Inside the dimension, roots made of life essence started extending outward. They eventually connected themselves to Thunder Dragon's grievous injuries. There was also the earliest citizen of the dimension of life, the Mermaid Queen, Elsa. Seeing the portal open and two exasperated figures thrown in, Elsa taunted Xiao Qing about what was happening outside. She could feel the power inside the dimension of life getting thinner by the second. And that could only mean one thing. Outside, Yuziyu was fighting his heart out to prevent the decimation of the planet. Darkness spent a hefty amount of evolution points to ravage the surroundings with a flame hurricane. In response to the dark flame, God Tree summoned an ice age that sculpted cold spikes on the field. Upon reaching the enemy's body, a sharp temperature drop stopped Darkness in his tracks. Even with limited mobility, he could just use Dark Impact to thaw himself out of the icy trouble. It wasn't only a defensive maneuver, as the dark energy pierced through God Tree's magma body. He quickly plugged up the new holes in his body with superior regeneration. Regaining momentum, Darkness beckoned the tree world advent. It was a big technique that needed a bit of setup that he could not get to before seeing God Tree jump in, with a big-ass lava hand made for crushing. That comedically massive fist was highly effective. Darkness nearly got crushed under its weight, but God Tree was not done yet. If he was going for a win, he'd have to go all in. With a desperate roar, God Tree expanded his scorching body fast and wide. Darkness, in its weakest form, knew that this was bad. The scorching tendrils of his extended body were nimble, strong, and almost impossible to dodge. This resulted in Darkness being torn to shreds. What remained of his tiny body coughed and cursed God Tree's endless tricks. When a pillar of light blasted from the sky, it locked Darkness in position. This opened up an easy grab on the little one-eyed form. Once grasped tightly, God Tree proceeded to use thunder control at point-blank range. Combining a fire form and thunder control raised the heat to an unbelievable degree. The intensity was hot enough to melt what remained of Darkness. Finally, everyone could see a wall of fire extending to the clouds. All beasts from all sides tried their hardest to find cover, to avoid becoming collateral damage. Alas, Darkness was a near immortal figure that could survive that hellish sequence of attacks and start regenerating. If things kept going like this, God Tree would be depleted of spirit power first, as Darkness continuously regenerated using evolution points. This was the first time Darkness had been forced into such a perilous situation. But, as he said, he intended to show everyone what despair truly was. Those beasts that God Tree caringly nurtured were powerful, and from now on, Darkness would claim them for his own. With that cryptic announcement, multiple dark system prompts appeared in front of him. God Tree was puzzled and worried. This bastard just kept pulling OP powers from left and right. This time, it was very straightforward. Sparky, who was still busy mowing down tons of Australian beasts, paused for a second. He felt something odd going on inside his mind. His consciousness was being hijacked by something invisible. The same thing was happening to the other Misty Mountain beasts. They were behaving erratically, while their eyes turned completely black. No one was spared. Even the most powerful generals struggled to fight for their sanity. The sole exception to the manipulation might just be Nine Tails, the strongest of them all. Kangaroo, who was bloodied and beaten, could already feel the taste of impending doom against the fox. Just as she was about to finish the job, the plague that infected her comrades managed to get its dirty, grubby hands on her brain too. She pumped up the temperature to the limit, burning everything in the vicinity, trying to burn the spell taking over. But it was too late. Darkness had spent 50 million evolution points for the assimilation technique. It was one of his most expensive and powerful skills. Within a limited radius, the loyal soldiers of God Tree lost control and rationality. God Tree didn't know what was happening yet, but he would find out soon. The first one to enter the fight made God Tree turn around. It was his premier assassin, his conqueror's blade, Sparky, the golden mutant ant. Still unaware of the mind plague, his guard was down. As Sparky took a quick first step to explode at speed, Sparky's unbelievably sharp blade, which had served his master, turned on the man he swore allegiance to. The cool and unperturbed fighter was gone. In his place was a bumbling and aggressive bug hungry for blood. Darkness playfully explained that assimilation is used to control the thoughts of other creatures, so all of the Misty Mountain subordinates were now his puppets. This was a lot worse than God Tree expected. If his precious weapons turned on him, the world might not stand a chance. Suddenly, a sneaky inferno blast spun in the air, aiming for him. It was promptly blocked by an earth element wall. It did not cause any harm, but upon sensing, God Tree identified the owner of those fearsome flames. The attack came straight from his most trusted general, one of his first allies, the powerful Nine Tails. Darkness snickered at the sight of comrades attacking each other, but the show was just beginning.
You can't keep getting away with this!
These puppets were aggressive, as if they were hungry for God Tree's blood. Nine Tails charged in with the aim to kill the most important figure in her life. Another Inferno Blast came out of her maul. Working off of that ranged attack, Sparky slashed in with a sextuple strike. Two powerful attacks came from the two he trusted most. God Tree was not expecting to deal with something this messed up. To add to the absurdity, Shingang, the man who denounced his humanity to serve God Tree with complete loyalty, used earth pillars to push him off balance. With him was the ferocious Tiger tribe, just waiting for their turn to come up. White Tiger, Xiaolan, and Qinggong, some of his most trusted and cheerful aides, were coming at him with full force from the back, while Lung Feng and Thorn took the other angle. They executed a perfectly timed joint attack to peel through the hard tree skin of their boss. Darkness goaded Yuziyu to just kill them all, so he wouldn't have to deal with the annoying attacks. But that was the last thing Yuziyu would want to do. So, he decided to use the majority of his remaining spirit power to activate the Tree World Advent, wrapping his mind-controlled subjects with his roots and holding them at a distance. The only way out of this tricky situation was to deal with Darkness himself. That was the ideal way to free his comrades, so he tried another multiple-pronged attack with 9 wood arboreal roots. Darkness smiled menacingly as he called on Little Panda to act as a meat shield against the lethal attack. God Tree tried to talk to Little Panda, but the mind manipulation was too intense. That split second of hesitation also opened him up for an attack that nearly shattered his whole head. Darkness laughed mockingly at him for falling for such a cheap trick. If he couldn't even stomach the collateral damage, he'd have no chance of winning. He continued taunting Yuziyu about the feeling of betrayal he must be experiencing. what he was feeling now. Darkness himself had already been through long ago. Deciding to finally join the fight himself, Darkness spent 2 million evolution points to swing the blade of destruction. The purple light of death swiftly came into view. God Tree, trapped in his position and distracted by his manipulated allies, took the attack as a direct hit. He could only bet on his defensive chances, using crystallization and reinforcement. The blast sent his body flying like a rag doll. As the smoke billowed, Darkness carefully extended his senses on the field. He could still see the misty mountain beasts sealed in their own little bubbles, which meant God Tree still had some spare energy to protect his crew at this point. The only thing that remained of his body was his cracked core and the little bit of bark connected to it. His spirit power was practically depleted, and the previous form had taken a toll on his body. In his last act as leader, he thought of at least sending everyone to his dimension. Darkness extended his grotesque limb to the defenseless god. He argued that even if Uziyu protected his precious allies now, they'd just die when he died. This was the game they both decided to play, and Darkness never viewed him as a serious opponent. His onslaught was not something that anyone could stop just because they wanted to. Just like how day and night exists as long as the planet rotates, Darkness, as an entity, is inevitable. With the moon's crash getting closer by the second, Darkness made Uziyu watch as the end drew near. His advice for the poor tree was to carry his regrets and unwillingness as he returned to nothingness. For the first time ever, Uziyu seriously contemplated his death. If he died, everyone would go down with him. That's not a fun thought to have while the purple beam of devastation heads for your severed and conscious head. By some miracle, an unfamiliar energy signature interrupted and rammed itself against Darkness. It messed up the aim and severed the hand holding God Tree's head instead. Before the head could hit the ground helplessly, it was caught by someone's beak. It was the White Crane, coming in clutch as usual. The hero no one expected, and no one deserved.
That's why he's the GOAT!
Darkness was peeved that he had let one of these pathetic beasts escape his assimilation net. So he left it to the other flying beasts to interrupt the bold rescue mission. Australian bats flew in, using their sonic attacks to try and make the crane drop God Tree's head. But the bird was crafty, strong, and swift. Some small-time bats were basically traffic cones for him. But facing off against Demon Cow was a different story. This monster ranked among the strongest in Misty Mountains. After all, right now, that same beast just clobbered the crane's face with a battle axe, knocking God Tree's head loose. The White Crane shot down like a meteor, so close yet so far. Down below, the number of real threats was staggering. The cream of the crop was waiting. Even with the injuries from plummeting to the ground, White Crane still stood his ground, trying to protect his boss at all costs, even if that meant facing off against the most powerful beasts in the world in futility. God Tree tried to let White Crane run quickly, as they just get crushed together at this point. But the brave bird proudly proclaimed that he would never run away, even while throwing up blood. Darkness watched with keen interest from a distance. White Crane added that he was already prepared to die when he came to this battlefield. If their existence became obstacles for God Tree, then he trusted that God Tree would still find a way to make it work like he always did. But he did not come here to be a burden. He came here to win, no matter the cost. It took an impassioned speech from an unexpected ally to wake Uziyu up to the fact that there might yet be hope for them. Darkness did not like that sliver of hope blooming. He hated optimists the most. So, to mess with God Tree, he targeted White Crane with a torturous grasp. Calling the other Misty Mountain beasts, he prepared one more move to bury all hope once and for all, something called fusion. Darkness slowly absorbed White Crane into his amorphous body while the bird yelled out to his master for help. God Tree wanted so badly to do something about it, but in his current state, he couldn't. The incarnation of evil was done with all the interruptions. It was his time to have some fun, taking all of God Tree's generals. Each one was submerged into the primordial body. Even the stronger Australian beasts were not spared. Kangaroo and his crew were swept along the way. And so the absorption began. Friend or foe, darkness did not differentiate between anyone. In the seas, those with sharper senses could feel the spirit powers rampaging on the land, wholly and slowly disappearing. All they could see was a tall curtain of darkness and nothing else. They did not know that thousands upon thousands of mind-controlled beasts were being fed to an ultimate technique. Darkness laughed maniacally at the thought of having every creature in the vicinity become a part of him eventually. The thick stream of beast essences traveled to a single point, being absorbed in the technique's origin. God Tree watched helplessly as his comrades and enemies alike were treated like animal feed. This fusion process gave birth to a grotesque amalgamation of every monster one could imagine. You had never seen anything like it before. Darkness bragged about absorbing everything down to the last beast and feeling the brimming power within him. He moved his hundreds of limbs and hooves, intending to crush his biggest opposition under his foot. God Tree did not even have the mobility to get out of the way, so his core suffered under the weight of 1,000 beasts. With the moon's imminent landing, the planet's magnetic field was going haywire, and its remaining lifespan was now only 20 minutes. Pushing himself to the limit and squeezing every last bit of strength he still had, God Tree managed to summon his roots with painful overexertion. Just as it was starting to look like he still had something left in him, darkness landed a punch that cracked his core in half. This might be it. This might be where our story ends. Taking the ground-down core of his greatest enemy, Darkness laughed like a madman as he likened God Tree to nothing more than an ant. Applying a little bit of pressure, he turned up the crushing pain bit by bit. God Tree tried his hardest to struggle with his pathetically thin roots, and Darkness just ridiculed his efforts. This futile struggle to cling to non-existent hope is an impasse possessed by most creatures. But the facts will never change, and death will always be the final end, no matter what form it takes. Unleashing one more overkill beam to erase God Tree from existence completely, Darkness made it look like a hopeless ordeal. As the death beam got closer, he cursed his fate and the cruelty of Darkness. The beam moved and spread out, distributing incessant destruction all over the war zone. Then suddenly, time stood still. Everything paused. God Tree opened his eyes and looked around. He was supposed to die, right? But the sensation felt a lot like that time when Divine Flower manipulated time. But this time, it was not just a few seconds pause. This time, the entire space and time continuum had frozen. Out of nowhere, a system prompt appeared before his eyes. With a solemn robotic voice, it referred to him by his human name, UZU. The system asked if he wanted to win. Caught off guard, he did not know how to respond right away, so he asked if there was still a chance to turn this miserable position around. The system just asked him to follow. 1 second, he was trapped between Darkness's fingers. The next, he was on top of a cliff in an unknown location. This was a view from 129,600 years ago, the epoch year when history had broken off, and the year Darkness was born.
You're so old. Where's your wife? Go home to your family, dude.
It was kind of crazy to comprehend. But could this mean that he actually time traveled? But the system corrected him, saying this was just a holographic memory. Darkness was born on a highly civilized planet, facing destruction due to certain reasons. He managed to escape before the end of civilization, and touched down on Earth during the Cretaceous period. The planet where his race previously prospered is currently known as Mars. The system urged God Tree to keep an open mind, as this might sound inconceivable. After countless years, Darkness woke up and met a human girl. After saving the girl, Darkness granted her a gift. She became the first human in history to possess a system. During that time, another significant event happened as well. The first spirit tide began to emerge. So, it would be fair to say that the system's activation triggered the spirit tide itself. The same thing happened the moment UZU was reborn as the Divine Tree. The circumstances of their birth are the same. After the first spirit tide was triggered, the world entered an era of cultivation and magic. That girl gifted with the first system became an absolute powerhouse. During that time, darkness kept his distance from civilization. But as time passed, his growth became too rapid, and his body started emitting a poisonous miasma. Everywhere he went, death followed, with all kinds of creatures turning into evolution points, making him more powerful. There was no way to suppress this miasma, as all living creatures emit an unchangeable scent. The girl understood this as well. She knew that darkness could wipe out every living creature in the future. So she betrayed him. It sparked a battle that gathered the most powerful humans on the planet. The intensity and scale of the fight were so fierce that you could smell the stench of blood from 10 miles away. The war lasted for a month, leaving the girl and darkness as the only survivors. Darkness pleaded with Ling Ling to stop this struggle. But even with a bloodied body and a broken weapon, she stood firm. With reluctant tears, she steeled her resolve for a kill or be killed situation. The survival of mankind hinged on killing a good friend from her past. Both parties fought with grief, and humans still exist today. That must mean they won, right? They only won because darkness decided to give up resisting and let Ling Ling live. That means humanity had never truly managed to defeat darkness. He was the one who jumped into the seal to end it all. The two had a mutual understanding of what had to be done. Little Black cried as he chose the path to end everything, even though he was scared of being trapped alone, separated from his only friend. But the fact that she was being harmed by his mere existence was a worse feeling. If he continued to live, there would come a time when Ling Ling would die because of him. He couldn't let such a cruel thing happen, so he sealed himself into nothingness. He reckoned that this would provide the best ending for both of them. With the last bit of evolution points he had, he helped Ling Ling recover from the month-long war. With tears in her eyes, she watched as her friend vanished. All he asked of her was to live for a really long time, a request that would not be fulfilled a few seconds after it was spoken, as a blade stabbed Ling Ling through the chest.
Emotional, damn it!
Little Black paused, not believing what he had just seen. His friend's life force slowly drained away with every cough of blood. A man had sneaked behind the boulders and delivered a fatal strike to her heart. He had been lusting over Ling Ling's system and the continuation of the spirit power era. Darkness tried to intervene, but it was too late. Another man emerged from hiding to get in some slashes and share the glory. They offered a fake apology, reasoning that they were just doing this for the sake of their sex. They wanted to sacrifice Ling Ling for their own interests. Darkness tried desperately to escape the portal he had willingly walked into, but he could not get out. He wanted so badly to kill those greedy bastards, the humans that actually dismember the person Darkness loved the most. They divided Ling Ling's body among different sects, trying to stop the dissipation of spirit power from the world. You could finally understand why Darkness loathed humanity. Ultimately, the spirit power era still came to a close. It was just the laws of nature. As for the Celestial Tribe, they were beasts nurtured by Ling Ling before, tasked with repairing the seal every 3,000 years. Yu finally understood the history of darkness. The way to victory was still unclear. The system explained that as long as no creatures died, darkness wouldn't be able to obtain evolution points. That sounded easier said than done, especially in the middle of a worldwide war. The system had a way to make it happen, but you would have to pay the price. You would have to take over as the new darkness, replacing the current one to maintain the balance. He asked if this was the system's plan from day one. It admitted to doing exactly that, because it had seen the future where Yu won. So he could just go ahead and take the new ability bestowed upon him by the seemingly omnipotent system. Thick and dark energy permeated Yu's core. The system asked him what his plan of action was from this point on. He answered that the first part was to defeat darkness, then he would save him. Before heading back out, Yu finally asked the big question of who was behind the system. The text prompt dissipated into green smoke and eventually took the form of a woman. Not just any woman, but the same one that Yu saw in the vision. The system itself was history's first system holder, Ling Ling. This should clarify everything that's happened up until now. Yuziyu was shocked, but the reveal did clear up a lot of questions in his mind. He vowed to resolve this resentment that had lasted for far too long once he got back out there. Meanwhile, the dimension of life was quiet and tense. Shi Yao Qing kept on trying to shatter the dimension walls, to the point of bleeding fists to no avail. Elsa kept on telling her to stop struggling, as God Tree had probably lost already. This dimension would start to shrink, and they'd get crushed to death. Shi Yao Qing could not care less about dying. She was just concerned about her master. Then, the entire field lit up with a golden light full of vitality. Elsa and Shi Yao Qing were taken aback and confused as to what was happening. They both felt the dimension gushing with power once again, which presented a surprising possibility. Time had returned to its original flow, and God Tree's core faced the death beam. But darkness felt a different vibe instead of a quick death. He watched as the core sprouted a whole gigantic body made up of sturdy material. He could not believe his eyes. This battle was just one surprise after another. God Tree's new body proliferated all over the place, establishing a foothold in the blink of an eye. The true Tutsi could feel the alarming presence on the mainland. Still, they couldn't possibly comprehend how an incomparably enormous spirit power was rising so fast. Even the sea beasts that were trashing human ships seemed fearful of it. They could only imagine how intense that mainland battle must be. With all his regenerated body parts in place, a hint of void power traveled along God Tree's new frame. Not going to lie, this is his cleanest form by far. What do you guys think? Thanks to the system's gift, he had obtained a stronger and more resilient body than he had before. Darkness refused to believe that something like this could happen by Yuziyu's hands alone. For the sake of defeating the misunderstood incarnation of evil, he had returned from hell. God Tree and his new combat void mecha form faced the enemy bravely. He called darkness by his original name, Little Blackie. Hearing that old pet name visibly disturbed the monster. Desperate to know how in the world you would know that name, he wanted to get some answers. God Tree played it cool and asserted that there were many things that darkness wasn't aware of. Being treated like the ignorant party for once, darkness did not like being left in the dark. He tried to attack with his tendrils, but God Tree didn't even bother blocking or dodging. The absolute Giga Chad just stood up and unleashed a ranged attack of his own. This simple attack was much more potent than the ones he had done before. It made darkness spew blood in one strike. Not letting the pressure plummet, God Tree charged forward. He was locked in to never allow darkness's cruel wish to come true. So he shot out a dark field of enigmatic energy that spread in a circle. This dark dome expanded ceaselessly until it finally covered the entire war zone. This technique seemed familiar to darkness. It was called space-time suspension, the ability to stop time without the use of any spirit power. Darkness argued that he was just delaying the inevitable at this point. Both the time suspended by the cosmos, darkness could say goodbye to getting new evolution points to spend on skills. But the big bad boss was confident that this would hardly matter with how many beasts he had absorbed. He opened his disgusting mouth, and a screeching echo wave decimated everything in its path. God Tree used crystallization, making his body nearly indestructible. Without minding the echo wave, he closed the gap and socked darkness in the mouth using his thunder-controlling fist. Darkness coughed up blood from his multiple orifices. To combat the overwhelming physical strength, he splurged out with flames, petrification, and a thunder dive. The combination of three deadly techniques rolled into one fearsome charge was a sight to behold. But much to his surprise, God Tree casually caught his body in mid-air with bare hands. Then he started feeling the essence of wind coalescing in those slender hands. At point-blank range, it would be impossible to dodge the incoming attack. God Tree sliced down using a flying leaf blade, cleanly cutting the monster's disgusting form in half. He wasn't satisfied with just cleaving the entire field. Darkness was resilient though, Taking advantage of the cover, he used a heavenly eye ray. With reflexes that were out of this world, Godtree swatted the attack away with his roots, expanding in size. Darkness charged in with unparalleled persistence, dwarfing Godtree's void form. Luckily, he was quick to bust out one of his most flexible abilities, Ice Age. Summoning icicle structures from hell, they stabbed and shredded the overinflated body like paper. Darkness could feel that the ice was a lot harder than the Ice Age before. Spending 100,000 evolution points, his vile body was glued back together with superior regeneration. He had 2.3 million points remaining, but Godtree was only getting started with his retaliation. Next came the light pillar that was multiple times stronger than the ones that could only inflict some burn damage earlier. This time, the scorching light was actively disintegrating Darkness's physical form to the smallest component. In response, he dipped down to 1.9 million points to surround himself with a solar flare Crimson Lotus and a thunderous shockwave. With this combo, he intended to turn Godtree and this hateful planet into a hornet's nest. To do that, you have to land an attack, and that's impossible if your eyes are being squeezed like balloons. One hand holding the monster in place, UZ readied his other for a devastating attack. He would never let such wanton levels of destruction happen on his watch. So he blasted Darkness at melee range, turning a pile of absorbed beasts into smoke. You got to give it to Darkness. If there is one thing he excels at, it would be resilience. No one could take strong hits better than this guy, but the sudden and drastic increase in Godtree's power was scaring him. You could only wonder what happened to this guy in a split second before his supposed death. With his form resembling melted ice cream, Darkness still had the gall to boast that he was unbeatable as he tried to purchase the Nullify skill. Much to his surprise, the system blocked him from using Nullify. This had never happened before. He thought that having enough points would give him any ability in the world. But it looks like nullifying the seal of time and space was just too big of a job, even for his purchaser system. That few seconds of surprise blunder left him open for another brutal punch to the jaw. Tumbling down on his back, he resembled a rotten potato, struggling to get back up. He couldn't fathom why this was happening to him. He was supposed to be unbeatable. Before thinking those thoughts, he needed to get back into a healthy state first. So he purchased the superior regeneration skill. Just like earlier, the system gave him an error message. This time, he really started to panic. He tried purchasing healing, power of vitality, regeneration, and every kind of recovery ability, but was met with persistent system errors. Such a thing had never happened before, so where did he go wrong? He turned to Godtree for answers. That guy must have done something to him and his system. But Godtree just responded by opening the mouths of his void roots to prepare an all-out attack. He wouldn't allow Darkness to run rampant anymore. Things must end now. Although he understood why the monster hated humans, involving every living creature in his planned extinction was crossing the line. The multiple heads of his void roots beamed out their destructive attacks in a concert of devastation. Once the immobile Darkness was hit, his flesh disintegrated in a brilliant light. This beam slowly burned through the monster, while dragging him through the ground mercilessly. With the last few specks of energy he had, Darkness warned Godtree that humans would also be his eventual downfall in the future. The sheer hate he had for those bastards was giving Darkness a second wind to push back. The moon had gotten so low that it was starting to touch the space-time suspension dome. If this goes on, Darkness will recover and another strung-out battle will take place. Godtree couldn't afford to risk that, so he might as well pour as much power as he could to thoroughly delete the miserable bastard. Darkness kept on trying to purchase any skill, and the system finally revealed what was happening. He had been invaded by a virus.
You're a victim!
By the looks of it, the virus might have something to do with the celestial beasts that he tried to absorb. Darkness writhed in pain as his body literally cooked. Godtree was doing his best, but he did not expect the resilient body to start dissolving from his attacks. For some clarification, The incarnation of White Elephant explained that this was because of the system virus, an ability implanted with celestial beasts to deal with the ultimate enemy. After being passed down through many generations, it is finally proving its usefulness today. Darkness turned into dark fumes, dissipating in the air. With him being weakened, it gave way for the earlier victims to show themselves again. The Australith King of Australia had broken free of the possession with his mangled body. Having a mutual understanding of their current situation, the former rival of the mutant tree yelled at him to finish the job. The apparition of Nine Tails also showed itself to provide some support. Sparky's incarnation pushed his master, now that they were so close to winning. Every beast general manifested their support to their master. Everyone was pouring their wills and hearts, so the boss must naturally deliver. Darkness was being forced into a tight spot, but he refused to accept this. He tried to remind them that with his death comes the dissipation of spirit power in the world, but that was not going to be a problem anymore. Seeing the confused Darkness, God Tree explained that he would slot into the role of darkness while maintaining his sense of self. To do that, he would put his foot down, open up his body, and unleash the single most dense and terrifying quantity of energy known to man. Darkness tried to order Australith to release him, but even the king of Australian beasts would gladly sacrifice himself just so Darkness could not reign. The beams of light continued to pour out, continuing the erasure of the incarnation of evil. Darkness was deleted down to the cellular level, leaving only a trail of essence. While he was being deconstructed, Little Blackie saw a glimpse of the familiar figure, the person that he loved the most. Ling Ling did not avert her eyes, but profound sadness could be felt within her gaze. In his final moments, Darkness felt his longing for his friend. He just missed her so much. In death, he never wanted to be separated from her again. The big bad boss had been erased from the physical plane, and the only thing left to deal with was the descending moon. From Darkness's resting site came a peculiar ornament floating in the air. It was a red nucleus surrounded by dark miasma. Ling Ling, the system, identified it as the core of darkness and tasked God Tree to swallow that thing. He grabbed it out of the air, feeling the weight it represented in his palms. After swallowing this, he asked if dead creatures would become his evolution points. But that's not how it works. It would just replace Ling Ling and keep the spirit power in the world intact. Curious and excited, he asked if he would get the purchaser system with it. Unfortunately, his body was programmed differently, so he would retain the same type of system as usual. Ling Ling mentioned that she would disappear once everything was said and done. Just like when a human reaches the end of their lifespan, she would go where she was supposed to go a long time ago. With the world's current situation, this was already the best case scenario for everyone involved. Up till the end, she was very happy to be able to fight alongside someone like Yuziyu. So, for one final moment, she would like to trouble him for one last send-off. He quietly complied and thanked Ling Ling for all the years that they had been fighting and growing together. With a final goodbye, she burst into a blinding ray of light, scattering into the ether. The space-time suspension dome started cracking open. Once shattered completely, complete radiance filled the bloody war zone. As spirits, Little Blackie and his most beloved human could finally reunite in their purest and most innocent form. They both swore that they wouldn't be separated again. Despite all the baggage between them, the love was still there. Ling Ling smiled and hugged the strange creature she had met when she was just a little girl. In a sense, they both got their happy ending in the end. It's enough to make a grown man cry. After Darkness dissipated into the ether, the contents of his grotesque body scattered all over the place. Golden spheres holding the beasts he manipulated and absorbed flew everywhere. They woke up in a daze, not having a grasp of what was happening. As soon as Big Panda popped out of his sphere, he immediately started looking to kill Darkness. Looking around, he saw his little brother instead. He ran and put his little bro in a headlock, assuming that his poor bro was being mind-controlled. The Australian Beast Force also touched down. confused at the sight of a bright blue sky. From the seas, you could watch as the moon naturally returned to its original position without any trouble. Sif could feel the breath of darkness disappearing in real time. That must mean the mutant tree finally won. Back to his gold and black natural form, Yuziu looked fresh, as if he did not just go through destruction and restoration over and over again in the span of a single war. All of his comrades were safe and sound, albeit a little shaken and confused. Shi Yaoqing stepped forward, not knowing what to say to her master. Meanwhile, the Sea Kings, who were expecting a Grand Slam victory, could not fathom that their all-powerful King of Darkness lost. The Crowd King in particular started thrashing around wildly, protesting the result of the war. That earned him a critical punch to the Carapace courtesy of Golden Jesus. The war was over, but the Straddlers would have to learn to accept defeat with grace. Yule also helped with the cleanup, using his manually controlled nuclear weapons. He was quick to act and take advantage of the massive swing in momentum they had just got. This led to the wiser Sea Kings issuing the order for retreat. They were in a bad spot, and the morale of the enemies was sky high. Just like that, the dominating force on water ran with their tails stuck between their legs. The human experts and fleets who were just clinging to dear life a few minutes ago couldn't believe the sight of sea beasts retreating to the depths. Unfortunately, the intense naval battles led to some severe damage on the friendly side, too. Orca had sustained some serious injuries, but his biggest gripe was the wiping out of his whole Orca tribe. The five-headed snake didn't even know how to comfort his friend. With a sense of peace and security, they turned their attention to the main land, where a mysterious light was emanating. It was coming from God Tree's golden body. He was finally notified of the successful system exchange. On top of his existing superior power, a hint of a regal shade could be felt. After the war against darkness, the entire world entered a temporary period of peace. The Australists ransacking different countries retreated to Australia, too. Humanity was so close to drowning in despair, but finally saw a ray of hope. The total death toll came up to a staggering 5 million.
That's what the kids call epic fail.
Out of the 14 sovereign states in Australia, only 7 remained. All countries that sent their forces to war have also issued their withdrawal. That included the beasts from different factions like Seth and the others. 5 days later, the recovery and reclamation process proceeded smoothly. The lazy bald head even had the time to lounge around and sleep on his master's branches now. The rest of the Misty Mountain beasts were pretty much back to their usual routine and eccentricities. Shi Yaoqing brought up the question of their following plans now that darkness was no more. She asked if they would continue staying in Australia. God Tree confirmed that they would be doing just that for a while. Since they had come all the way to this place already, they might as well conquer the land and subdue the leaderless beasts. Shi Yaoqing would start moving humans away first, as she had to hurry back and deal with the aftermath of the war in her own corner of the world. Before she bounced out, God Tree handed her a few bottles of life essence to reward her subordinates for a job well done. White Elephant and the rest of the Celestial tribe also arrived to seek an audience with God Tree. God Tree's open-air Australian throne had been landscaped and manipulated according to his whims. At his foot were the warriors, who had contributed significantly to the victory 5 days ago. The White Elephant explained that they were there to bid farewell to the divine tree, as a form of respect. They were already leaving amidst the recovery, but God Tree urged them to stay a bit longer. However, they expressed their gratitude for helping save the planet. He was the one who formally ended the dispute that had stretched for tens of thousands of years after all. Starting today, the Celestial Tribe's descendants would no longer bear the heavy burden of a cruel destiny. When asked about their plans, Yuziu suggested that they stay with his group at Misty Mountain. The Celestials thanked him for the offer, but they needed to return to Celestial Mountain, their home. When needed, they would answer the call from their benefactor. That could work, too. You can't go wrong with having Celestial allies. With a final respectful farewell, they flew back home, darting through the skies. It was a pity that Tree couldn't rope them in as formal members, but at least they were open to collaboration. White Elephant, who was more accustomed to the human world, would join Xiaoqing for a little while, returning to her nation. Tree watched as these beasts took to the air and felt jealous, and he still couldn't do that effortlessly. The Hua Xia Federation was still dealing with the unexpected win against the apocalyptic threat of the incarnation of evil. They knew, as well as everyone else, that there would no longer be any creature or group on this planet that could stand against someone as powerful as that tree. Humanity should count its lucky stars that this deity didn't have any intentions of fighting against humans again. For now, at least, the Federation head could only silently hope that it stayed that way in the future as well. The Freedom Federation took the successful war quite differently. Currently, they have deployed some troops for rescue operations in Australia. Council members of the United Nations had drawn up the playbook for the rescue operations. But their paranoid leader wanted to send their armies over to defend. He was worried that the beasts in Australia would be a threat to the citizens. His staffer heavily opposed his orders, as the coalition of nations wouldn't like things that might lead to unnecessary troubles. But the blonde bastard didn't care about that. He thought every country was prioritizing rebuilding after the Australith rampage, so it was the best time for them to take action. He wanted combat divisions and armored cavalry knocking on other nations' doors, in the name of protecting world peace. Back in the war zone turned base camp, Tree was messing around in his dimension of life. It had already been filled with pearls produced by the Mermaid Queen. With an accepting smile on her face, she cheekily teased Tree that she did not expect him to win. But at the end of the day, he did win, and it was a very painful victory. Elsa insisted that her king only wanted to be free and live. From the standpoint of Darkness's followers, that line of thinking made sense. While the root constriction loosened, Elsa noticed that Tree was now emitting the spirit power of her king. She bent the knee and requested to be allowed to serve him from now on. He paused for a second, assessing the sincerity within her words, and accepted the request. Back in the real world, Ninetails came up to her master with a few guests that he had explicitly asked for. These were some of the most powerful and fearsome beasts in Australia's lineup. They were quite a headache as enemies in war. The behemoth and the crimson lotus platypus, in particular, were worth nurturing for their potential. Other than them, there were also a few tribes that were willing to swear their allegiance to the new god. Scanning past the other beasts, Tree couldn't find the kangaroo or the cat that wore the cloak. Ninetails answered that she made the call to release them. Right now, those two were hiding behind some quarries, trying their best to recuperate from their serious injuries. Little Panda had been deployed to track them down for a specific reason. Of course, they thought that he had come to finish the job, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. But Little Panda hurriedly insisted that he just track them down to pass a message. He also brought a vial of life essence enough for two. Ninetails herself sent this bottle. She also wanted to let them know that they were lucky to be alive, so they should go and find a place to continue their lives and not think of pointless revenge. Little Panda advised them not to waste their hard-won lives. The cat was so triggered by the arrogance of that sentiment that her cloak fell off. Seeing her face, Little Panda was smitten, but he still only had eyes for his dear Xiao Ai. Kangaroo chose to be the bigger man and admitted that they had lost. As a reply, he wanted Little Panda to relay to Ninetails that he would accept this metaphorical death and would never disturb her again. Just like that, the Darkness arc had concluded. Thanks for watching. Boys, Tree is back and the stakes are higher than ever. We pick up where we left off with Lil Panda sending off the remnants of Australia's beast force. Meanwhile, Tree was beginning to realize that having too much of a moral backbone was hindering his progress. After defeating Darkness, he gained a hopping 120 million evolution points to spend. It was the largest haul he had ever scored. The first ability he decided to invest in was his mastery over mists. Upon reaching level 5, the ability evolved to create undying mist beasts. Additionally, he unlocked the dimension of mist. With another dimension added, his combat power should increase by leaps and bounds. Testing his newly upgraded ability, he summoned an undying mist beast in the form of a kangaroo. It had the strength of a transcendent third order and appeared much more materialized. White Tiger analyzed the new mist kangaroo, thinking it was pretty weak. That earned him quite a few lashings from the boss. God Tree entered his new dimension to check out what was inside. There he found numerous mist beasts in a variety of forms. They seemed to be the souls of creatures that had died. Now that he could throw in darkness, he might have gained access to the space of the dead. He also noticed that the stronger mist beasts were absorbing the souls of the weaker ones. After a single trip inside, the kangaroo mist had already reached the fourth order of transcendence. It seemed like cultivating them would not be a problem, but what God Tree really wanted to unlock was the dimension of darkness. Maybe unlocking that dimension could be achieved with the help of a certain someone. That someone was none other than the Dark Dragon himself, Thunder Dragon's father. God Tree sent out one of his void roots to check on the father and son. By this point, both dragons' injuries had mostly recovered. Dark Dragon had gained a newfound respect and gratitude for God Tree's benevolence. God Tree just thought it would be useful to have another dragon on the team, so he managed to heal the big one, since dragons only need a sliver of life to fully revive. He asked Dark Dragon if there were any dark attribute mineral ores in Australia. It turned out there were, at the peak of the tallest mountain in the northwest region. The previous king of Australia held a monopoly on ores. That was just what God Tree needed right now. So he hurriedly sent one of his roots to survey the land, excited to unlock a new dimension. It didn't take long to unearth the riches hiding at the peak of the mountain. God Tree's void root exploded into the mines, and he was awestruck by the sight of so many dark attribute ores. By his estimation, this should be enough to open the dimension he wanted. The big-bodied mammoth, Glacier, was tasked with transporting every ore back to their home base. After a single trip, Glacier managed to bring the ores back to the boss. Using his roots and branches, God Tree began absorbing their essence. The process produced quite a dark aura surrounding him. Concentrating his focus on opening a new dimension, signs of success started showing. Finally, he was able to open the ominous gate to the dimension of darkness. It came with a divine ability, Darkness Domain, and a powerful field ability that erased the enemy's perception. Bro just literally became Gojo at this point. Testing it out immediately, the entire area was swallowed by a pitch-black dome. His forces started freaking out, thinking they were under attack or something. The effect of wiping away all perceptions inside the domain was a very promising combat tool. Even transcendent fourth order beasts like White Tiger were affected, acting like headless flies. Upon canceling his domain expansion, he looked at the remaining dark ores with glee. There were still a ton of them to absorb. 2 weeks passed in the blink of an eye. God Tree was busy turning a barren desert into a healthy forest with an abundance of trees. As for the humans, they convened for another world conference, including the elites of each country. The venue was none other than Inferno City. This was the place at the center of innovation. They were the first to integrate spirit power into machines, building a defense system capable of thwarting beast tides. The conference would mainly discuss humanity's next move after the Darkness incident and the logistical problem of ruined Australia. In the diverse continent of Europe, a powerhouse had risen above all others, the Vatican. Their representatives were excited to finally have a discussion with the rest of the world powers. The 10 Nations Alliance, secretly controlled by God Tree, was also attending the conference. News of this summit quickly reached God Tree's ears, thanks to his Peregrine Falcon network of information. Yuli, the master of magnetism, was spearheading the conference for the sake of humanity's future. Maybe the existential threat of darkness was enough to finally unite the world. God Tree dismissed that idea as a joke, though humanity would never be united, even after 100 of these conferences. Meanwhile, he was busy extracting the rich resources of Australia, scouring the land for multiple ore mines. It's just a pity that he couldn't find any light attribute ores wherever he looked. At least his 9 great dimensions have expanded greatly, especially mist and darkness. His goal is to reach 10,000 meters. With everything taken care of, he passed down the order to leave Australia in 5 days. Out of nowhere, God Tree started sensing strange fluctuations for his void tree root. He entered his void dimension to check it out, and his eyes shone with curiosity at what he saw. There was a green planet in the middle of the nothingness. Curious, he started moving toward the singular planet. He had his void tree root wander around the endless space of the void, breaking through plane after plane. And this time, he managed to spot a planet filled with vitality. Since ancient times, humans have been searching for extraterrestrial life forms, so this was a huge discovery. He dove deep into the strange planet, and upon breaking through its atmosphere, he found a lush land filled with greenery. God Tree also saw a figure of a woman walking through the forested area. Upon closer examination, this humanoid existence had a few key differences from humans. Nevertheless, this was a groundbreaking discovery. Back on Earth, God Tree tried to think of the implications of his new breakthrough. Unfortunately, such a long-distance exploration was way too draining in terms of spirit power. But you believe that what he saw was akin to an elf. They should be an advanced race with an innate affinity for elemental powers. To find a planet inhabited by advanced life forms was game-changing. He could only hope that the green planet did not have any sixth-order transcendent beings or anything crazy like that. Now that darkness is gone, thanks to the system, he could only depend on his own grind to get stronger. Suddenly, Little Panda extended a message that the orca wanted to meet with the boss. At the shorelines, God Tree met the orca with his void root. It turned out that they had gained the majority of control over the sea. With 5 of the 7 Sea Kings dead, conflicts for the thrones were rising. This would be the perfect chance to solidify their footing and conquer the remaining sea tribes for a full takeover. God Tree also felt that this was the perfect time to expand their reach underwater, so he approved Orca's plan. He also asked where Serpent was. As if on cue, the shoreline waters were disturbed by a gigantic wave. Underneath was the humongous mutated Great Serpent, which had already reached the 4th order of transcendence. He was even up to 8 heads now. His growth was beyond God Tree's expectations. Furthermore, the serpent could use fear to feed his growth rate. The more feared he could devour, the stronger he could become. Now that he had reached the appropriate stage, it was time to leave the water and join the rest of the main force on land. Meanwhile, Orca was tasked with overseeing any developments underwater while preserving strength. From the skies came White Tiger and Xiao Lan, flying with a sense of urgency. It turned out that the subordinates of darkness had shown up once again.
We do not care.
The subordinate she was referring to was the Hooded Cat. She stood before God Tree to plead allegiance and join their forces. The Black Cat wanted to repay God Tree's kindness for sparing the kangaroo. He accepted her pledge and assigned her as one of the guards. She seemed sincere in her desire to serve, so it shouldn't be a problem to let her in, right? Meanwhile, Xiao Lan and White Tiger were staring at the 8-headed serpent in shock. The last time White Tiger saw him, he was just a tiny snake, vulnerable to kidnappings. Xiao Lan was not expecting to personally witness another legendary creature, but here they were. Since they were on the topic of sizes, Emperor Alligator popped up, refusing to be outdone. His entrance got White Tiger's fur wet with salt water, though Demon Cow and Chingon looked at the serpent fondly. They did not expect such exponential growth. Like the others, Demon Cow could still remember the baby snake from a few years ago. Thorn also recalled the time when Emperor Alligator wasn't as big as he is now. They were witnesses to these insane growth spurts. Lung Feng teased the Emperor, recalling the time when he was so frightened of dying in previous battle. Back when they were normal humans, Chingon, Thorn, and Lung Feng were almost eaten by White Tiger. The Tempest Wolves also reminisced about the first year. when Xiao Ling and Xiao Qing were attacked by the cleaving axe serpent, a time of grieving after their first collective battle. Tyranno-Titan was shocked to hear these untold stories, as he was quite a late addition to the team. As far as Glacier knew, Ninetales and the Peregrine Falcons were the first to join God Tree, but they didn't know the whole story of how it all began. Since everyone was in a nostalgic mood, Ninetales agreed to tell the story of the early days with God Tree. The days when she was just a helpless fox, being hunted down by the cleaving axe serpent. While the beasts were having their story time, the boss was busy cultivating his radiant energy. The 5 days of prep time to leave Australia ended quickly, and all the beasts started entering the 9 great dimensions. Dark Dragon, also known as Nether, decided to leave on his own as well. The gang's next destination was Africa, an ancient continent known for its variety of wildlife, even before the Age of Transcendence began. Since the start of Spirit Tides, all information regarding Africa had been closed off from the public. At this moment, a hunt between a man and a gigantic bird was taking place. With his axe, the man persistently chased after the escaping beast with vigor. He managed to jump into the sky and deliver the bird's demise. It only took one cleave to take the bird down, leaving a gaping wound. This mutated human had the barbarian bloodline coursing through his veins, giving him the physique and strength of a killer. The bird would serve as food for his village for a few days. From afar, God Tree's roots were starting to map out the land, surveying it for any relevant details. He was not expecting to see another one of the legendary races inhabiting the land. With their physique, strength, and outstanding battle awareness, barbarians transcended human capabilities. God Tree wanted to test something out, so he opened the dimension of life in front of the barbarian hunter. Surprised and clueless as to what had just appeared in front of him, the hunter recoiled in fear. Then came the mutated 8-headed serpent, snatching his prey and establishing dominance. The hunter helplessly watched as the beast tore the bird apart limb from limb. Upon seeing the hunter, the serpent turned its aggression towards him. Desperate, the hunter jumped with inhuman agility to avoid the attack. He knew that he would die if he tried to fight, so escaping was his only choice. But even that option was not possible, as the divine flower cut off his escape route. With a burst of her vigorous power, the barbarian was swept away. Under divine flower's power, the aggressive hunter turned into a catatonic fool. Little Panda had also arrived, praising divine flower for such a great takedown. Infatuated with the panda, Divine Flower was on cloud 9. God Tree delegated the task of finding out more information about the barbarians to Ninetales. Meanwhile, it was about time for him to find an appropriate place to lay his roots and establish a base. After finding an area with ample space, God Tree's main body burst out of the ground and massive clearing in the greenery. Next up would be formally starting the hunt. Opening his dimensions, the beasts of Misty Mountains started pouring into Africa, one by one. Bro was on his villainous colonizer arc. At the forefront of this new conquest were Sparky and his ant army, scouring the lands for spirit stone mines. The Tiger tribe arrived with their usual intensity, eager to find valuable treasures. Emperor Alligator took charge of the reptilians, aiming to dominate the continent. As God Tree unleashed his forces, he suddenly felt something noteworthy. He could sense 2 significant auras nearby that warranted inspection. After digging through the land, he discovered an Earth Spirit stone mine ripe for harvest. Nearby, he found a Fire Spirit stone mine with an equal density of ores. 2 valuable ore veins had revealed themselves unexpectedly. This must be a good omen for what Africa could offer. While he was laughing in celebration, a nearby village sensed his presence and the formidable spirit power overflowing from him. The old chief reckoned that the source must be the giant tree that appeared on the plains out of nowhere. They could feel a constant wave of gentle spirit power emanating from the golden tree. Some villagers were aware of the demonic tree from Huaxia, but it seemed implausible to find that monster in their lands. As far as the chief knew, God Tree should still be in Australia, not in their ancestral domain. The only way to be sure was to investigate, so the villagers quickly formed a team of bear-riding warriors, with the goal of chopping the tree down to make beds. Meanwhile, the barbarian imperial city also received news of the tree's appearance. The transcendent Fourth Order barbarian emperor smiled at the enormous spirit power that had appeared in the vicinity of the bear tribe. Since the bear tribe had already sent out people to investigate, perhaps the imperial city should as well. The barbarian emperor stood from his throne, determined to check out the fuss himself. This sudden emergence also attracted the attention of Africa's beasts. One of them was the transcendent Fourth Order snow lion. The lone beast watched from afar, sensing and evaluating the situation. Africa's elephants and insects took a more aggressive approach, heading directly for the tree's position. One of the cleverer beasts, a black snake, was still debating whether he should join this brewing storm too. All the creatures of Africa were in an uproar. Godtree's horrifying spirit power was affecting even Fourth Order creatures. They had all come to a collective agreement to chase away the outsider from their land immediately. If they didn't cooperate now, the tree would likely take over their land soon. Most importantly, every part of Godtree's body could be considered an irresistible treasure. Uzid was well aware of this large-scale coalition approaching him. He also knew they were tempted by his treasured parts, not to mention his life essence. So he tasked his commanders to ensure that not a single beast came close as he absorbed his spirit stone harvest. Little Panda and his team were starting to worry at the sheer number of powerhouses inching closer. Godtree had just finished fighting darkness, the strongest being on the planet. Now, he had to deal with the forces of an entire continent again. Demon Cow was currently out of commission as he was trying to break through inside the dimension of thunder. Likewise, Thorn was busy breaking through inside the Earth's dimension. Godtree reckoned that the beasts he had in Tao would be enough to handle Africa, though. The Bear Tribe warriors were the first to get close. Their area used to be a modest grassland, but it was now a sea of trees. As they approached, the horror of Godtree's spirit power became more apparent. While they were busy sneaking in, they were discovered by one of the heaviest and strongest factions in Misty Mountain's army. The Arctic Bear quickly dispatched the first warrior with a single bite, devouring half of his body. Polar bears had no business being in this part of the world, yet here they were. And so, the skirmish between the Bear Tribe and the actual bears commenced. The same could be said for the Tiger Tribe and the Pride of Lions, under the command of Snow Lion. White Tiger wanted his roar to set the pace of the battle, but he was upstaged by the previous leader of the tribe. White Tiger complained, but was scolded by Xiao Lan for being immature, instead of leading through combat. Aside from the roars of lions, the rumbling trumpets of elephants could also be heard. The faction that met their charge was the Great Apes under King Kong. This section of the battlefield was a contest of pure strength. Elephants versus apes, which side are you betting on? How many wars do you want?
Another one.
The elephants effectively used their larger size to trample the apes, but the apes were no pushovers and immediately went for the legs. Sure, the elephants were big, but the apes had superior, humongous strength, enough to throw the front lines into the air. Like a bowling ball heading for the pins, the attack quickly disrupted the trampling. Things were looking good for King Kong and his crew, but that quickly changed when a mutated elephant took to the stage. This black elephant had some blue discoloration in its skin and possessed a superior aura. With one swift motion, it filled the battlefield with raging water. The wave swept away the apes in one go, stealing their momentum. From afar, Little Panda and Nine Tails watched, as the land transformed into a catch basin filled with water. The apes were quickly losing ground, and their white-furred commander was nowhere to be found. That was because the great ape was in the midst of breaking through. Bro was sitting like a villain. That's plus 1,000 aura points. His evolution was surprisingly heading in the direction of a human form. Godtree watched as the great ape wrapped up his level up. Upon finishing, he immediately asked for Godtree's orders. The great ape had evolved into something akin to an entirely new species of human. If humanity discovered this fact, another war might start. Moreover, he was now emanating a malicious aura with tremendous power. So, God Tree decided to give him a spirit ring to calm the malicious energy, preventing a berserk state. The great ape gladly wore the artifact and thanked his master. Since the ape clan had already engaged in combat, they needed their commander with them. Without wasting another second, the shredded humanoid ape jumped out of the dimension to lead his troops. The apes might be evolving into superhumans in the future. If that happened, the course of human history would be altered. On the battlefield, the water elephant was dominating the apes all by himself. After flooding the land, he was now hurling rocks with insane accuracy. The apes were no match for such a bizarre enemy. Almost all of them were heavily injured, some had died, and some were on the brink of death. As the water elephant pushed forth to finish the job once and for all, Little Panda wanted to go ahead and provide some much-needed support. But it seemed that wouldn't be necessary, as the great ape had arrived. Little Panda and Nine Tails were taken aback by the breakneck speed of the rushing beast. By the time the water elephant sensed the new speeding presence, it was too late. The great ape opened with a devastating punch that sent the water elephant flying, shattering one of its tusks. The difference in size was staggering, but the difference in strength was even more so. The great ape growled, seemingly going Super Saiyan with his increased aura. The air bent as he demonstrated terrifying speed. What came next was a beatdown in overwhelming proportions as he rained down punch after punch on the mutated elephant. Even the elite fighters on the sidelines were impressed with his speed. After what seemed like 1,000 punches, the water elephant finally buckled under the accumulation of injuries. But its durability cannot be understated. It still had enough energy and grit to retaliate. But tanking one full-powered attack triggered the great ape's innate talent, converting the injuries he sustained into strength. Holding onto the mutated elephant's trunk, the great ape yanked as hard as he could until he finally ripped the entire trunk from the elephant's face. After bleeding out at a fatal rate, the giant beast was finally brought down. The great ape bravely stood before the remaining elephants and taunted them with a bloody roar. God Tree molded a humanoid form to observe the fight and couldn't help but praise the great ape's power. If that guy continued to grow, he would definitely become one of God Tree's sharpest blades. On the other side of the field was the clash between the bulls and Sparky's insect army. Sparky entered the fight with a bang as they executed the entire vanguard of bulls with a quadruple strike. But they were caught off guard by the enemy's second pronged attack, consisting of hungry ants coming from the flank. Thankfully, they were bailed out by the flames of Nine Tails, obliterating the enemy ants. She alone would be enough to deal with a whole army of enemies. Rhino beasts running at full speed, deadly wasps filling the skies, monstrous gazelles looking for prey. These were the factions greedily heading for war against God Tree's soldiers. Fortunately, Little Panda and the high-leveled Misty Mountain troops were enough to keep them at bay. With more and more enemies appearing, God Tree was starting to consider providing support. To add to their headaches, an even more problematic faction had joined, marching to the beat of their war drums. It was none other than the Imperial Barbarians, riding in on their massive wooden platform led by the Barbarian Emperor himself. He stood at the forefront with an expectant smile on his face. They came here ignoring the small-time beasts, directly targeting Hua Siya's mutant tree. The barbarian sorcerer introduced himself as Hua Man, and tonight, he would be lighting up the beacon of fire. With his immense power, he conjured a wave of fire that could contend with a massive tsunami. This sea of flames was heading for God Tree himself, aiming to burn the entire forest, including its propagator. Of course, God Tree just scoffed at such an arrogant display of destructiveness, but he admitted that the strength of these barbarians was not half bad. God Tree did not even have to move to deal with the wave of fire. gold silk monkey and his trusty staff had it covered. After winding up in mid-air, he used Big Dipper's swirl to swallow the flames into the tip of his staff. Taking control of the wave, he parried it back to where it came from flawlessly, seeing the fire's tsunami bouncing back to them. The sorcerer was at a loss for words. But the Imperial barbarians on the platform stood tall, unbothered by the incoming wave as a barrier protected everyone. The smile on the barbarian emperor's mouth deepened with interest. He ordered his troops to never let their guard down, as they had never faced a stronger foe before. Behind Gold Silk Monkey, the dimension of fire opened, and the former commanders of Australia's beast force emerged. With two more powerful beasts appearing, the Imperial barbarians were quite surprised. Suddenly, one of Godtree roots sprouted right in front of the platform. The root twisted and morphed into a humanoid form to confront the Emperor. He was impressed by the fact that the barbarians still targeted him, knowing who he was. These brutes did not show up to help humanity in the fight against darkness, but they dared to disturb him right now. The Emperor just laughed at him, thinking that the humans who showed up back then were just sending themselves to their deaths. Seeing as these barbarians only cared about themselves, Godtree finally decided to act. In just a few seconds, he flooded the area with a thick blanket of mist, lowering their perception. Behind the mist came the terrifying gaze of Godtree's void assassin. Leon burst onto the scene by taking out one of the barbarians in a single slash. What followed can only be described as a massacre, courtesy of snake and boar beasts. While the barbarians were struggling with the mist's debilitating effects, the beasts were free to pick them off one by one. With this, Godtree's hunt had officially begun. Using his roots and branches in the shape of hands, he destroyed the platform holding the Imperial barbarian royalty. The arrogant Emperor didn't want to waste time. He wanted to fight against the mutant tree's main body directly.
Stop it. Get some help.
And so, he left the Misty Mountain beasts to his subordinates while he jumped behind enemy lines. There, he met Godtree's avatar and swiftly brought out his weapon of choice. Using his humongous spiked club, he deleted Godtree's avatar without a problem. These barbarians were warmongers. The sorcerer named Huoman, their great priest, and all their elite fighters shared the same fearless behavior. The most intense among them was the bloodthirsty Emperor. Godtree welcomed the challenge, looking forward to the chance to plunge the arrogant Emperor into despair. The barbarian Emperor continued his rush, seemingly flying from a single leap. The next thing in his path was the Kangaroo Mist. This one got the first attack off, but was easily dodged. Chaining another punch, the Emperor raised his club to block. It was so impactful that it sent the barbarian flying, hitting one of Godtree's branches. After reaching its current level, the Undying Mist Beast had obtained the strength of a mid-stage transcendent fourth order. So, what would happen if another one were to appear to confront the Emperor? Let's find out. Keep in mind that these mist beasts are practically immortal. Since that was the case, the Emperor started busting out the big guns. Using his aura, he manifested a beast avatar. This was the barbarian race's totem ability. With a lion and an elephant incarnation, the Emperor tried to charge forward again. Godtree found it interesting, but that was it. Meanwhile, the other Imperial barbarians were going toe-to-toe with the Misty Mountain beasts. The collision was bloody, as both parties pushed themselves to the limit. Thankfully, the Ice Dragon was there to be the great equalizer, freezing most of the barbarians in a single attack. This could have continued for a while, until a half-moon slash interrupted the dominant show of abilities. It came from the barbarian priestess and her staff. To answer back, Ice Dragon attacked with Frigid Frost Soul. The priestess immediately put up the Descent of the Sun God, a defensive spell. The whole field turned into an ice sculpture, the status of the priestess unknown. Back in the main event, the barbarian Emperor was cooking with his totem beasts. The lion and the elephant were formidable enough to break free from the mist beasts. Even when other beasts came as reinforcements, the Emperor never stopped laughing like a crazed warrior. He was laser-focused on turning God Tree's body into a source of untold treasures to harvest. He intended to dig God Tree's whole body out, to make him the barbarian race's sacred heirloom. To do that, he would have to somehow bypass the lethal flying leaf blades. Using his spiked club, he did what he did best, brute forcing his way out of trouble. Finally, after multiple obstacles, the Emperor reached God Tree's main body. As a treat, God Tree morphed a fraction of his being into his humanoid form. The Emperor found God Tree's musings about the morality of humans questionable. Discussing these concepts would be more convenient in a humanoid form, but he could also just use his usual horrific god-like construct if necessary. When the Emperor kept on yapping about taking God Tree back as the barbarian's sacred item, God Tree looked at the puny human, like a deity looking down on an ant. This glare definitely made the Emperor recoil a little bit. At the start of this war, God Tree was wondering if there was any possibility of coexisting with the barbarians. But he finally realized that it was just wishful thinking. Other than using force to suppress them, nothing else would work. This applies not just to the barbarian race. Humans and beasts are the same. They just can't wait to cut his body up and use him as a treasure. Before, God Tree wondered if he had become too ruthless with all the wars he was involved in. But now he knew that foreign powers would only grow more powerful, and he would have no way out without his ruthlessness. The Emperor pretty much confirmed this thought. He even added that there would come a day when God Tree would be pushed to the brink of death, and his own beast army would turn their fangs on their master. But God Tree had changed. He had now adapted some of darkness's nature. For the sake of survival, he could become a selfish scoundrel who would kill indiscriminately. The first victim of this changed perspective was the barbarian Emperor himself. After fighting valiantly, the barbarian was one-shotted by a piercing root. The fearsome warrior felt just like that, but barbarians weren't labeled as a legendary race for nothing. Suddenly, the Emperor stood up, wielding an even greater force. God Tree had already expected a trump card, as he could feel a faint ancient breath from the Emperor earlier. Maybe the barbarian had awakened the ancient bloodline at the doors of the afterlife. Nevertheless, his attacks were more fearsome than before. God Tree was down to play for a little bit more, though. While the war in Africa was raging on in the space above the entire Milky Way galaxy, a pair of ice-cold eyes appeared. Its galactic crimson glare was focused on the little blue planet called Earth. The eye noticed that Gujit had disappeared, meaning he was defeated by some life form on a tiny planet. It blinked and pondered just how insignificant every other existence was.
Hold up. Wait a minute.
Back in the war, the boost from the ancient bloodline made the Emperor the ultimate fighter. He was relentlessly going on the offensive against God Tree's combat-oriented form. His strength was on a whole other level, enough to be considered the strongest human UZ you had ever met. But what made him even more deadly was his sheer intensity and spirit. He was a pure fighter, risking his life for the thrill of it all. But that also made the Emperor prone to openings that God Tree could exploit. Even so, he would just grit his teeth through the pain and bounce back with his spiked club in hand, ready for another round. Drawing deep from his ancient bloodline reserves, he turned the heat up to an even higher level. Channeling all the wild energy within, he sent a high explosive strike rampaging towards his target. God Tree tried to block the initial impact, but he did not come out unscathed. Just the wind pressure alone was enough to scratch through his tough skin. Then came the main attack, a winding amalgamation of pure destructive energy. To test out his durability, God Tree gladly received the ultimate form of pure offense, with arms wide open. He did it just for the sake of showing that even an ultimate attack didn't warrant alarm. This bruised the Emperor's ego. Clicking his tongue, he shifted back to a more direct approach, only to get bloodily repelled by a punch. After coughing up blood, God Tree grabbed him with a death grip. At this range, the Emperor pulled out another trump card, transforming his spiked club into an organic weapon. With a swing of the seemingly alive weapon, it opened its jaws to chomp on God Tree. But Yuziyu easily shattered the organic weapon to pieces with a swing of his arms. Without giving the Emperor room to breathe, he slammed his legs down for a fatal kick. It made the Emperor slide on the floor on his back. It had been a while since God Tree had engaged in hand-to-hand combat, so he was having a hard time with coordination. Nevertheless, his rusty skills were enough to put the barbarian on the back foot. The disparity between their strength should be apparent for anyone to see, yet the Emperor still kept on standing and putting up a fight, even with his weapon destroyed. This battle maniac was just happy to fight against the strongest life form on the planet. Even if he died doing so, he would have no regrets. Most people who faced Yuziyu in the past would either retreat or wouldn't come near him in the first place. So he was starting to admire the Emperor now. In order to show his respect, he decided to mess around and let the barbarian witness his true power, the form he used to vanquish darkness itself. With a deafening roar, he made the entire area screech to a halt. His winding branches scooped up the Emperor, constricting his body with crushing tightness. The ultimate warrior felt fear at the presence of boundless spiritual power. Staring the fool in the eye, this was God Tree's way of killing all hope left within the Emperor. He did not finish the fight right away, though he continued flexing his power by cleaning up the battlefield as the Emperor watched. God Tree's roots and branches extended throughout the entire war zone, quickly picking up the African beasts helplessly. They tried to resist capture, but the roots and branches were way too tough. They were inescapable. Just like that, the war in Africa was wrapped up in a few seconds. Back in Europe, they had developed some sort of clairvoyant espionage power to determine that God Tree had begun the African conquest just a few days after Australia. In the 10 Nations Alliance, the bishop could also feel the fluctuations of the mutant tree's power from continents away. God Tree stood at the peak of his power, under the moonlit sky. He made the barbarian Emperor watch as the African beasts lowered their heads and submitted to their new lord. This was a display of dominance. No one else could perform other than Yuziyu. And so, God Tree asked if the barbarian Emperor was still holding onto the desire to fight him. The brute could only gnash his teeth in silence.
You can't keep getting away with it!
Holding the barbarian in his tight grip, God Tree could feel the Emperor's will to fight dissipate. It would be a waste to kill him. So into the dimension of life he went. While God Tree was busy adding another fighter to his collection, the dimension of thunder suddenly opened. Distracted, the three Beast Stooges failed to prepare for another Beast's fierce sneak attack. Fortunately for them, the calmer that just emerged from the thunder dimension was there to bail them out of trouble. Demon Cow had reached the fourth order of transcendence, turning his horns into a crescent bull horn, emanating the sheer power of thunder. Another one of God Tree's generals had leveled up immensely. After saving the three Stooges, Demon Cow immediately paid respects to his master. But since he arrived late and the war had already wrapped up, he had no one to test his newfound strength on. After the impressive breakthrough, with the crescent bullhorn becoming his true weapon and the gravitational black hole, he had become an absolute powerhouse. Turning to the side, God Tree tasked Nine Tails with herding the defeated enemies, willing to join their side into the dimensions. Under the bright moonlit sky, he could not help but think about the laurel tree that he planted on the moon. Since he just gained a lot of free time, it was about time to take a look by extending his senses up to the moon. In a short amount of time, Laurel Tree had already reached the fourth order. It might be because it was the only living organism on the moon. Nevertheless, its rapid growth was quite the good news. Back on the surface, Sparky came up to the big boss to report their casualties to be around 10% of their forces. But they had also managed to capture 8 African powerhouses alive, encasing them in ice. The number alarmed God Tree. At the start of the war, he felt 9 powerhouses trudge forward. Extending his branch to a hidden part of the battlefield, he quickly spotted the remaining uncaptured powerhouse. The cowardly mutated soaring serpent immediately started crying out for his life, even though he possessed some of the most noxious poisons in the world. Not only that, but his scales could also blend into space, effectively hiding his aura. God Tree quickly chucked the serpent into the dimension of life, making a mental note to check in on the poisonous beast later. Sparky was put in charge of delivering life essence to the injured, as they enter a phase of rest and recovery. Next up on the docket was spending the millions of evolution points God Tree had banked. Flying Leaf Blade, one of his main offensive moves, had to go first. To reach level 5, he had to spend 10 million points in one go. As soon as the upgrade was confirmed, its power and sharpness poured into his body. Excited to give it a try, he swung his vines and produced a fearsome burst of strength. The Flying Leaf Blade took the form of a crosscut, traveling to the skies. It was so oppressive that the air in the area got sucked into it. God Tree watched in shock as his test attack broke through the atmosphere and flew to the vastness of space without stopping. The system renamed the technique the Sky-Splitting Blade, unlocking 1% comprehension of the path of the Vanguard. Although unfamiliar with this concept, such a powerful attack came at only 1% of skill comprehension. Just how powerful would it become if he reached 100? On the other side of the world, in the Sky City of Freedom Federation, the global summit had just begun. Yuli spoke of humanity's growth as 18 humans entered the Fourth Order of Transcendence after the war. Still, they needed to discuss the rise of mutant beasts. Vatican's St. Ilya brought up the fact that Australia was cooked, and Africa was an unknown factor, not to mention, the South Pole continent was out of reach. Freedom Federation's representative, Alan, took the chance to take a jab at Asia for always being on the losing end against mere beasts. Hearing that diss, the veteran Asian soldiers stared daggers at the arrogant man. Instead of apologizing and pulling back, Alan actually doubled down on the insults. This Alan dude wants all the smoke when we haven't even seen his ass on the front lines. Hearing that nobody talking trash about Asia made even Xiao Ling fired up. So are the rest of the warriors who had fought against Beast Tide after Beast Tide. Yuli had to step in and make Alan stop acting like an ass, as this was not the time for provocations. Intimidated by Yuli's power, Alan backed down. White Elephant wanted to teach the man a lesson, but it wasn't really worth it. Grasping a spirit leaf in her hand, Xiao Ling contacted God Tree. Since the spirit minds of Africa had all been seized and completely absorbed, the dimensions of fire and earth had expanded to the size of a small city. He also started cultivating spirit flowers and herbs in each corresponding elemental dimension. God Tree reckoned that reaching the 100,000 meter mark would start attracting extraterrestrial creatures to his domains, making a miniature world. After extensive rallying, Ninetales had also finished putting every beast back into the dimensions. With their business in Africa wrapped up, it was about time to go. Meanwhile, Sky City's International Summit continued. One of the representatives brought up the fact that the mutant tree contributed the most in the last war, saving humanity from extinction twice now. With the tree's abnormal growth, none of them could hope to catch up, let alone surpass him. Humanity would not benefit from trying to go against him. Moreover, the mutant tree took over 3 cities in Huaxia and never harmed its citizens. As long as humanity doesn't foolishly wage war, they should be fine. That's when Alan came in to run his mouth about the other representatives being too scared of the mutant tree.
Huh?
Xiao Ling dared the arrogant man to challenge the tree if he really wanted some trouble. Frustrated and too dumb to cook up a clever response, Alan gnashed his teeth. Thankfully, the more sensible representatives spoke in favor of peace, as they couldn't afford to sacrifice innocent lives when they didn't even have hopes of victory. The saint concurred, as the citizens of the world were warming up to the idea of the mutant tree being their savior. Yuli finalized the agreement for humanity, to steer clear of the mutant tree's business. At the same time, he felt a jolt of horror struck his mind. The more attentive warriors in the conference hall must have felt it as well. Dismissing that feeling, Yuli continued with the meeting. In one of Sky City's industrial buildings, a dimensional rift just opened out of nowhere. Yuzi's roots slithered out, eventually shifting and morphing into a humanoid form. He jumped out of the building, making his presence known to everyone nearby. From above, he breathed in the view of the world's most technologically advanced country. It was a city of steel that could be used as a frightening war fortress. Yuli set out an avatar to meet with God Tree's incarnation. He was pretty impressed that the master of magnetism was attentive enough to notice him so quickly. Yuli asked who this intruder was, but he already knew the answer to that. Nevertheless, God Tree's appearance in this city at this time could pose some problems. Closing his hand, God Tree destroyed Yuli's avatar, along with a nearby skyscraper to demand a real face-to-face discussion. At the podium of the conference, Yuli suffered the backlash of getting a part of his consciousness destroyed. Xiao Ling smiled as her master was finally setting some plans into motion again. Yuli looked up to the entire delegation, warning them that the strongest being on Earth had arrived. God Tree stepped foot on the destroyed building, continuing to take in the view of the city skyline. While Yuli was tweaking and throwing up blood, he warned the delegates of what was happening. The entire room immediately turned fearful, worried that the monster had come to take over Sky City's fortress. Xiao Ling quietly scoffed at their terror. A transcendent knight felt his special sword cry out. Alan felt an unease he had never felt in his life before. Even the delegate from the Vatican could sense that the Lord was warning them of what was to come. There were no two ways about it. Yuli had to go out there and face the music. With his speed, it didn't take long to reach the outskirts of the city. The master of magnetism finally dragged his real body out, and he brought quite a few friends as well. Alan started sweating profusely, and his spirit power was suppressed just by being near the absolute beast. Blondie noticed this and started daring Alan to back up his words from earlier. God Tree assured everyone that he didn't come all the way out here for trouble. He had come to personally extend an invitation for Yuli to join his cause. Everyone was naturally shocked. Blondie knew he wasn't the one being invited, but even he was tempted. If Yuli accepted, God Tree would personally help him break through to the fifth order of transcendence. The fifth order was a realm that no human had ever touched yet. Blondie was feeling more and more tempted. Being careful about what the deal might entail, Yuli inquired why he was chosen specifically. Ignoring the question, God Tree found it irksome that these humans were flying over him and forcing him to look up. So he knocked them down below his eye level using sheer aura. It wasn't a proper technique, just a showcase of the difference in their spiritual power. Unsurprisingly, God Tree's secret agents present were not affected by the spiritual pressure. Yuli was already familiar with God Tree's immense power, as he had felt it from afar before. But being subjected to it directly was a different story. He could feel the disparity between a transcendent human and a godlike being, something that words alone could not express. With these daring humans kneeling before him, God Tree found them much more pleasing to the eye. From a distance, a hooded figure sensed the commotion and praised God Tree's wave-like power. Humans were already helpless against a mere Sea Dragon King invasion. If the tree wanted, he could wipe everyone out without much effort. The hooded figure suddenly felt a splitting headache as the space contorted heavily. It seemed like Hoodie here had just received some sort of order from a mysterious presence. With a wave of a hand, Hoodie opened a dimensional rift connecting to God Tree's main body. Unaware, God Tree's incarnation continued his conversation with Yuli, expressing his desire to help protect the fortress in exchange for lending him Yuli's power. God Tree promised that Yuli's city would become an independent kingdom. From the side, Blondie was practically blushing with jealousy at such a tasty deal. Get Blondie a contract too, he might be the best glazer of all time. But Yuli knew that nothing in life came for free. So, He asked if joining the Misty Mountain would mean surrendering the rights to all of the city's spirit mines. Considering Godfrey's enticing deal, that was a small price to pay for excellence. Yuli finally agreed to join the extensive roster of Misty Mountain. We got Budget Magneto in the team before GTA 6. The other delegates understood why the Master of Magnetism agreed to the terms. They would have, too, if such an offer had been extended to them. Instead of finalizing the deal, Godfrey's attention shifted to his main body, as his void had just been breached. The hooded figure had somehow opened a portal, invading his space. Hoodie didn't take advantage of the stationary tree, simply observing. Finally, Yuzi's consciousness returned to thwart the intruder. He confronted Hoodie, demanding to know their identity and how they managed to break into his private space. Instead of answering, Hoodie charged forward, closing the gap and brandishing an attack without uttering a word. Godtree responded with his roots, trying to trap and block the intruder, but Hoodie's speed was far too fast. He could tell for sure that Hoodie was human, but that reaction speed was anything but. With an open palm, Hoodie began coalescing a pure white energy. Repositioning to a spot where they could deal the most damage, the hooded figure introduced themselves as the Guardian of Humanity. With one swift motion, the Guardian unleashed a massive impact attack, trampling Godtree's sturdy body. The attack was so powerful that it managed to damage his crystallized form. This Guardian was definitely formidable. She might seem human, but she was surely not ordinary. Her speed and strength were too abnormal. Godtree couldn't help but sense hints of darkness in her fighting style. He didn't like this feeling of unease at all. They couldn't afford another crisis right now. Raising her hand, the Guardian manipulated the spirit power in the air, calmly preparing another attack. It only took her a few seconds to create a massive cyclone of pure destructive energy. The accumulation of so much spirit power began to shatter the space around them. As the Guardian launched the hurricane of spinning death, she awaited Godtree's response. He quickly summoned his draconic roots, which roared with intensity. The roots opened their jaws and started swallowing the harrowing hurricane whole. Even the mysterious Guardian was surprised by such an unconventional response. While the draconic root handled the defense, the rest of the fearsome tendrils launched a counterattack. At point-blank range, one of the tendrils baptized the Guardian with overwhelming force. Then came the other three, overwhelming the intruder with pure physicality. Once the perfect counter settled, the mysterious woman stood firm without a hint of injury. Godtree tried to use appraisal on her, but couldn't discern anything about her identity or abilities. Since that was the case, perhaps the more powerful heavenly eye could reveal the truth. Even with it, he could only see the special ability called Vessel and her unknown race. Perhaps she wasn't human after all. Maybe the one he was fighting wasn't the enemy's true form, just a vessel being used to carry out the main body's wishes. Curious, Godtree began interrogating the intruder about her goal in entering his domain. She admitted she was just curious about how powerful the one who defeated darkness was. She considered this fight a small test. That didn't change the fact that this mysterious woman had already far surpassed every other creature on the planet in terms of power. She asserted that her race was not important and that the reason she came was to express gratitude to Yuziu for protecting the planet and to deliver a thank you gift. In her hand was a golden strand of her origin. It was an artifact meant to aid Godtree in his metamorphosis, helping him step into the Sixth Order of Transcendence. He thought the Sixth Order was an insurmountable wall, yet here was a mysterious person gifting him a shortcut. The Guardian also extended a friendly warning that the fight with darkness was just the beginning. At that moment, the deepest part of the cosmos was on the verge of an unprecedented eruption. With that catastrophe would come an existence, much more terrifying than mere darkness. Just when Godtree thought he was in the clear, the stakes suddenly went intergalactic. This is literally peak.
Someone cooked here.
Having a hard time believing what he just heard, Godtree rubbed his eyes to make sure he wasn't having a nightmare. As soon as he opened them back up, the mysterious Guardian was already gone. The cosmic phantom he briefly saw must be that woman's main body. And those words of warning she spoke struck a chord inside him. What was left of their interaction was the strand of origin essence. It seems he can't take his foot off the gas yet, as there's yet another reason to get stronger. Back in Sky City, things had ground to a halt as his humanoid form suddenly stopped moving. He had to use his full consciousness to stand up against the mysterious intruder, after all. Every delegate just stayed put, holding their breaths, confused as hell. Alan reckoned that the God Tree was full of openings right now, and this might be an excellent chance to strike and make a name for himself.
Woo, I'm about to make a name for myself here.
If he could take down the mutant tree, he might earn the respect of those who look down on him. And so, with his fourth order transcendent power, he decided to risk everything with all his might. Alan glimmered with an aura full of vitality. Screaming at the top of his lungs, the fool made his move. Of course, the rest of the delegation looked at him like he was a lunatic. Alan didn't care, he would charge in, and he wouldn't care if anyone got caught in the crossfire. With all of his might, Alan attacked. Xiao Ling just watched from the sidelines, letting the fool dig his grave. Alan's green aura eventually coalesced into a fearsome claw. He wanted respect and recognition so badly that he would resort to such dirty tactics. With a single attack, his strength exploded, shaving the top of the tower clean off. He might be a crazy fool trying to gain fame, but the strength of a fourth order transcendent was undeniable. The delegates, including Yu Li, had to block against the impact of their proximity. The dust eventually started settling, revealing a sight to behold. Everyone watched as Alan got skewered by the roots, his life leaving his mortal body in an instant. God Tree had just returned after dealing with a guardian, and nonchalantly apologized for going silent for a minute. He tossed Alan's corpse like garbage, deeming the fool deserving of death. Now, it's time for Yu Li to finalize the joining of forces. God Tree opened one of his dimensions, exuding immense vitality. Gold Mask asked Yu Li if he was really willing to betray humanity when he was the biggest proponent of unity. But Yu Li understood that if humanity wanted to survive, they needed to always search for a new way out. This was his. Without a semblance of hesitation, he entered the dimensional rift. With his business in Sky City settled, God Tree opened another rift in space to go back home. Throughout the whole process, he didn't even look in the direction of the other transcendent humans, deeming them insignificant. The rift he made connected directly to the moon, with God Tree's consciousness back in his main body, utilizing his ability to manipulate space, made traveling to the moon very convenient. There, Laurel Tree could finally meet the Master for the first time since he was a seedling. God Tree commented on how small the Laurel Tree was, fully aware that he was abnormally huge. Showering Laurel with the essence of life, God Tree excused himself for a minute as he had to handle some business. But he could stay on the moon without needing to breathe. He still activated Tree World Advent to spread some green on the lunar surface. In just a few seconds, a sea of trees spawned, making the barren and cratered surface look much better. The moon was also the perfect site to attempt to break through to the sixth order using the strand. He might not get there all at once, but he reached the peak of the fifth order at the very least. And so began his breakthrough, making the moon light up with rich spiritual power. At this moment, something big was occurring within the cosmos. Taking root within the vastness of empty space was the final form of the sacred divine tree, a being that possessed the supreme creation technique. It was so massive that its body supported the universe itself. It depended on devouring planets and heavenly bodies for nutrients. Everybody gangsta, until the real God Tree shows up. On each of its leaves were records of every creature's life. As a life ended, a leaf withered, making way for a new one to sprout. A sacred divine tree had been lying dormant for millions of years, but had now awakened due to the battle between Yuziyu and darkness. Yuziyu's breakthrough on the moon served as the final nail to awaken it fully. With its all-seeing eye open, its strength started growing at a terrifying rate. Back on the moon, Godfrey's physical form had started molding itself into a different shape. The increase in his spiritual power capacity was so drastic that he had to open the 9 dimensions to support the growth. Much to his surprise, the separate dimensions representing each element started merging before his eyes. By the end of the process, the 9 dimensions had merged into a single giant singularity. With it came a qualitative change in his heavenly eye. He worried that the sudden merge would plunge the dimensions into chaos, so he had to check. Inside, he found a tree connecting the elemental dimensions, merging them into one, and then splitting them up again. This brought on a stronger connection between different elements, opening endless possibilities. The size increase in each space wasn't anything to scoff at either, as a real merge would probably turn his personal domain into a real living and breathing world. Laurel congratulated him on his breakthrough, but Godtree hadn't stepped into the realm of 6th order transcendence yet. His body's power capacity was so massive that he only managed to reach the mid-stage of the 5th order. That was with the use of half the strand of origin. In due time, he would use the other half to make the leap. While he was busy assessing his growth, he didn't notice the divine eye looking down on him with curiosity. Noticing its crimson presence seemingly looking into his soul, Godtree felt dread like never before. The owner of the eye finally found the one who defeated Gujit, also known as Darkness. Laurel nervously asked his master what kind of creature the eye belonged to. Feeling disrespected, the eye stared at Laurel, and the mere gaze set him ablaze with the flames of annihilation. As the fire grew larger and stronger, Godtree tried his hardest to stop the spread. He countered the flames using his improved Ice Age. The spikes of ice encased Laurel as he pleaded to be saved. But a mere Ice Age wasn't enough to extinguish the persistent flames. They eventually started spreading rapidly, reaching Yuzu's main body. While he tried his best to fight off the blaze, he asked the eye what its deal was. It just continued staring him down, labeling him as an insignificant mutant tree. From its iris came a thin beam of untold power. Along with the inextinguishable fire, Yuzu was plunged into ruin. That thin beam of red light rampaged through the moon, carving its surface up like a hot knife through butter. After cleanly slicing the moon in half, its total destruction was imminent. The moon exploded into a billion tiny pieces of space debris. Then Yuzu woke up, cold sweat dripping from his body. At first, he was confused. He clearly felt his life slipping away from the beam and the fire, but his body was still intact. He hadn't died, and Laurel wasn't burnt to a crisp. From an outside perspective, Laurel was just confused as to why he was suddenly plunged into a daze. It finally made sense now. Everything that happened with that crimson eye was just an elaborate illusion. Bro got played by a genjutsu user. Godtree had never been played like that before. The experience was so vivid that it felt all too real. The enemies in the cosmos are playing a whole different ballgame than him. They are horrifying existences that far surpass darkness. He was reminded of the warning the Guardian gave him. He was beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. In this universe, he's just an insignificant speck under the microscope of the real players. He can't wait for a more optimal time to absorb the remaining half of the strand of origin. Godtree needed to get stronger as fast as he could to prepare for whatever cosmic horrors lay in wait. In the deeper parts of the universe, in places beyond anyone's sight, there are enemies beyond his current comprehension. His newfound resolve to break through quickly showed results. Laurel could feel his master's spiritual aura growing at unprecedented speeds, becoming more terrifying every second. His draconic roots were also going haywire as the drastic increase put a strain on every root. With a formidable roar, one of the roots seemingly gained limbs. As his breakthrough defied the laws of the universe, a galactic lightning tribulation began, descending from the ether to strike Yuzu down. It was something he had never experienced before. The tribulation's electrifying power coursed through his body. Resisting it was borderline impossible. It was so destructive that his tough exterior began to break. Yuziyu's entire frame was plunged into a state of constant destruction and immediate regeneration. His limbs roared in pain, as the tribulation proved more brutal than anything he could imagine. Thankfully, he decided to use the moon as his breakthrough site, as the lightning might have destroyed a significant portion of the planet if he had done it there. After an extended period of excruciating agony, the dust finally settled, revealing a solidified root system in the form of a tribulation lightning-filled dragon. Laurel stared in shock at his master's new form. Godtree was big before, but his current size was far greater. Additionally, his core had gained a single horn, with a tinge of crimson at its tip. It's safe to say that he liked the new form, and the additional red horn added an edgy touch. His main root had transformed into an azure dragon. It might look like a legendary beast, but its capabilities far surpassed the dragon race. Within its claws, energy balls overflowing with the power to annihilate gathered. These constantly growing divine energy balls are made of the power of life itself, dealing amplified damage to dark attribute monsters and undead creatures. Based on its current concentration, a single ball should be enough to wipe out an entire continent.
Now that's a lot of damage!
Laurel excitedly asked if he had finally made the step into the Sixth Order. But as expected, he fell a little short, only reaching the peak of the Fifth. Yet, with his 9 dimensions constantly expanding, his overall battle power should be utterly terrifying. It's just that the final step into the Sixth Order was impossibly difficult. When he returns to Earth, he needs to find that Guardian again to gain some clarity regarding the cosmic situation. There's also the matter of the planet he discovered in the void before. That alien domain should be worth investigating. As for the Undine Laurel, its immortal body should be enough to replace him as the divine tree of Earth if he needed to travel to faraway domains. But before that, he needed to consolidate the powerhouses on Earth and continue recruiting new companions. Using his void route, interstellar travel to the moon and back shouldn't be a problem. As for the air, it's still really thin right now, but his beast generals shouldn't have a problem breathing here. But just to be safe, he established an illusionary world dome covering the entire sea of trees. This should make the air problem less prevalent. Another issue was gravity, as he couldn't go overboard and affect the gravitational relations between the Earth and the moon. That's a problem for Demon Cow to solve, as that guy had a better grasp of gravity than anyone else. With his plan laid out in his mind, it was about time to call this army to their new home base. Opening the dimensions, the beasts of Misty Mountain started pouring out into the foreign land. They looked up to see the cosmos in the open, confused as to where their master had taken them. White Tiger got too excited and flew too far out. Thankfully, Godtree was there to restrain him. The battle-hungry Sparky's first thought was to split the strange space open. He would have done it if the boss hadn't stopped him. Godtree finally managed to sit them down and explain that they were currently standing on the surface of the moon. He only called a few trusted beasts for now, as he needed them to take care of something. After receiving their tasks, Godtree transported them back to Earth's surface, to their homeland, Misty Mountain. Ninetails took charge and reminded everyone to split up and do their respective jobs properly. For now, they would be in charge of earthly matters, while Godtree dealt with more significant things in space. First, he needed to find a way to make the moon more habitable for his subordinates. But before that, there was one more thing that needed his attention. So, he opened the dimension of mist. Inside, the undying mist beasts immediately paid their respects to the big boss. This was the dimension where he stashed Yuli to cultivate and train with the mist beasts. Looking at this man's tools, Godtree was quite impressed. He was a powerful attacker with extreme speed and even invisibility to boot. If Yuli fought Xiaoling right now, she would have had a hard time safely retreating. Godtree asked Yuli why he thought he had been roped into the team. The reason was plain and simple. His unparalleled ability to control magnetism was a priceless asset for future battles. But for now, Yuli needed to harness his magnetic force to create a wormhole that could lead an entire army across the starry skies. The amount of spirit energy required to do such a thing would be immense, but God Tree assured Yuli that he would have his full support. In the future, there would be no more trivial skirmishes like the ones on Earth. Something much bigger is brewing, and battles of cosmic proportions will become the norm. For now, Yuli needed some more training, and the dimension of thunder would be the perfect place to expand his spiritual power capacity. You must think of more ways to strengthen Yuli's control over magnetism, to create wormholes. He will be a cornerstone of the army in the fights across the universe. From the moon, let's dive back into Earth and even deeper into the depths of the ocean. The powerhouses of the ocean floor were at an impasse as they looked at a long-lost comet popping up after an extended absence. The mermaid clan was especially incensed as their leader and sister, Elsa, had returned. When the Sea Kings were fighting against the mutant tree, she was a no-show. Her kin had long since treated her as a shame to their family. And now she had come down here as a representative of Misty Mountain, as an enemy. But her goal was not to start a fight. She came back to urge her clan to join Misty Mountain too. Speaking of Misty Mountain, the beasts on land were busy with their respective assignments as well. Divine Flower tagged along with the Great Ape to pick out promising beasts among their clan, determining some with the strength and intelligence to reach the Third Order. But the leader himself, the Great Ape, was quite picky when it came to choosing promising apes. Xiao Lan and Long Feng's sister were discussing why the Great White Ape had a tail when he was not supposed to have one. Eventually, Divine Flower managed to separate a few talented apes from the bunch to lead them to a special training spot, surprising Qin Gang. She proudly stood at the forefront of the stoic gorillas, ready to train for their breakthrough. As for Qin Gang, it looked like he was working on a particular side project, away from everyone, piquing Divine Flower's curiosity. Using his power, he lifted a vast piece of land and painstakingly built a city on top of it. After God Tree left Misty Mountain, there was a void left behind in his usual spot, so Qin Gang built the castle that he had longed for since he was a little boy. Divine Flower praised him for his ability and creativity, and he promised to save a special room for her in return. She then requested a bigger room so she could sleep with a handsome little panda at night. Hearing that instantly shattered Qin Gang's fragile heart. Clueless of Qin Gang's feelings for her, Divine Flower cheerfully skipped away as little bro cried his eyes out. To make matters worse, Little Panda also received news of the castle and came to request a room. Qin Gang immediately started beating Little Panda up as his ape homies cheered him on. During this time of preparations, the mutant elephants subdued from Africa were tasked with transporting spirit ores of different elements to the moon. You then carefully buried these ores under the moon's surface, creating reserves that would eventually thrive as the rich spirit energy of the moon nourished them. After that, he also created a giant pit filled with a pure distillation of the essence of life. Using the Tree World Advent, Yuziu expanded the reach of his domain, covering the surface of the moon. Currently, greenery can be seen from Earth, altering its appearance drastically. Yuziu had been living like an old farmer, tilling his land these past few days. For a moment, he felt happy toiling away and preparing the new home base. But he reckoned that the essence of life's spiritual lake might not be sufficient for everyone's use. The solution was quick and easy: divert even more vitality-filled water directly from the dimension of life. He might have even gone a little overboard, forming a decent-sized lake on the moon's surface. At least he was confident that the size was big enough to accommodate everyone. Still, he felt like something was missing. So he turned to Laurel for answers. Laurel could now use moonlight projection to reach out and summon Qin Gang and the apes over. The summons also included Demon Cow, Emperor Alligator, Ice Dragon, and everyone else stationed on Earth. He laid down the foundation of their operation, but he'll need his building team for the moon's reconstruction. Meanwhile, White Tiger was currently embroiled in an intense shouting match with the Phoenix Demon. They literally butted heads, refusing to back down against one another. Their fight seemed serious and was quickly devolving into a brutal face-off to the death. White Tiger kept on repeating his catchphrase, "Everyone will die," and the Phoenix was having none of it. Shooting a pillar of flames, White Tiger quickly maneuvered out of the way. He did not realize that had he been hit, he would have been obliterated, as the beam had the power of a nuclear blast. The Phoenix Demon was pissed and was not planning to let White Tiger off the hook. Why the hell are they fighting in the first place?